Hey guys, tonight we begin with a question your great-grandma never asked. Why did the kids stop napping and start rearranging the furniture at lightning speed? Between 1886 and 1904, Coca-Cola wasn't just a soda. It was a socially acceptable adrenaline shot sold in glass bottles. You didn't need a prescription. You just needed a nickel and parents who hadn't read the label. This is what happens when a nation gets high. Politely. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back, together, into the quiet corners of the past. You stand at the counter, staring at rows of glass bottles filled with brown liquid, each promising to fix everything that's been wrong with you since birth. The pharmacist has a mustache that suggests authority and a white coat that suggests trust. He tells you, "This one is special, invigorating," he says, in the same tone a preacher might use for eternal salvation. You don't ask what's in it. Nobody ever does. The label says Coca-Cola in fancy script, which sounds both exotic and respectable. You nod, hand over your coin, and he pours you a glass. It's cold and alive. You take that first sip, and it's like every nerve in your mouth wakes up and salutes. The fizz dances, the sweetness rolls in, and something deep inside your skull begins to hum. You blink once, twice, and for the first time all week, the world seems manageable. You smile at nothing. The pharmacist smiles back, as if he's just handed you enlightenment in carbonated form. Outside, horses clop along the dirt street, and you swear the rhythm matches your heartbeat. You don't know what's in it, but you know it's working. The exhaustion that's been hanging from your bones for months dissolves. You feel sharp, focused, maybe even brilliant. You start to think you could fix your entire life if you just had another glass. The man behind the counter nods like he's seen this before. He probably has. Business is good. America is tired. People are lining up for miracles they can drink. You don't feel like you've been drugged. You feel alive. And that's the dangerous part. Because what you're really tasting isn't just sugar or spice. It's confidence distilled. A whisper that says, "You're doing fine, even when you're not." Nobody suspects anything because this isn't a back alley operation. It's a pharmacy. Respectable. Civilized. A place where men in spectacles measure things precisely. If it's sold here, it must be safe. By the second glass, your tongue tingles pleasantly, and you can't stop talking. You tell the pharmacist he's a genius. He tells you it's all chemistry. You walk home with your mind buzzing, and your steps too quick for your shoes. The air feels different, cleaner. You notice the sound of children laughing somewhere down the street and think, they should try this stuff. You don't know it yet, but they will. Everyone will. Within a few years, the drink that's lighting up your brain will be in every town, on every corner, poured for people who think it's just another refreshment. Nobody will mention the ingredient that makes it special. Nobody will call it a drug, because that word is for criminals and poets, not polite people sipping from glass bottles. At dinner, you talk faster than usual. You tell your wife you found something remarkable at the pharmacy. She looks curious. You pour her a glass from the bottle you brought home, and she loves it immediately. "It's uplifting," she says, not realizing how accurate that word is. The two of you sit there, smiling for no particular reason, as if the world has finally remembered how to be kind. Later that night, you lie in bed, eyes wide open, thoughts darting like lightning bugs. You're not tired, and that feels like a blessing. Tomorrow's chores seem laughably easy now. You can't wait for morning, for another sip, for that little spark that makes your blood feel like champagne. The label said delicious and refreshing. It didn't say habit forming, though maybe it should have. But why question something that feels this good? Why dig into the details when the world finally makes sense again? You drift into half sleep, not knowing that what's pulsing through your veins isn't energy or happiness, it's history in the making. In a few decades, they'll rewrite what this drink was, pretend it was always innocent, always harmless. But for now, it's 1,886, and you're one of the first to taste America's favorite secret. You take another sip in your dreams. It fizzes softly, like applause. The war ends with paperwork, but not peace. You can still smell it, gunpowder, sweat, the sweet rot of tents left standing too long. The country is stitched back together like a bad quilt, technically whole, but unraveling in every corner. The North congratulates itself on progress. The South clings to its pride, and nobody's quite sure what to do with the silence that follows 4 years of screaming. So they drink, they chew, they dose. They look for anything that makes the ghosts less noisy. You walk down a main street in Atlanta, 1,880-something, and every other sign promises salvation in a bottle. Dr. Merriweather's brain dust, liver glue for the modern gentleman, elixir of eternal vigor, now with extra laudanum. Everyone's selling comfort. The only difference between a pharmacist and a preacher is the price tag. You stop at a counter just long enough to realize half the city is trembling, the other half is smiling about it. The word addiction doesn't exist yet. People just say nerves. John Stith Pemberton knows nerves. He's got them carved into his body like battle scars. A Confederate officer turned pharmacist, he's seen too much and healed too little. A saber wound left him with more pain than peace, and morphine is his shadow. He keeps a bottle in his coat pocket, the way a priest keeps a cross. The drug helps him sleep, until it doesn't. Then it helps him forget. But you can't sell forgetting to polite society, so Pemberton rebrands his personal misery as innovation. He sits in his small laboratory, surrounded by glassware that clinks like polite applause, and he starts mixing. A bit of coca leaf extract here, a spoonful of cola nut there, a splash of alcohol for courage. The room smells like sugar and sin. He's chasing a feeling he can't quite name, that bright, almost holy spark just before the pain dulls. If it helps him, maybe it can help everyone. That's the logic of every inventor and every addict. You can almost picture him testing the first batch. It's thick, syrupy, a little bitter. He adds more sugar because America doesn't swallow anything unpleasant without it. He tastes again, nods. His hand trembles from the morphine, but his eyes light up. He doesn't know it yet, but he's just brewed the most socially acceptable drug delivery system in history. He writes the ingredients in neat cursive, gives it a dignified name, French wine, Coca. It sounds expensive, continental, like something that would never appear in a police report. Atlanta eats it up. Clerks buy it to stay awake. Mothers buy it for melancholy, and veterans drink it to stop shaking. Cocaine and wine in a bottle, a legal communion for a wounded nation. The temperance movement hasn't ruined the fun yet, and pharmacies are the safest place to get high. The line between medicine and miracle is just good marketing. You see Pemberton standing outside his shop, hat tilted, convincing another tired soul to try his tonic. He looks like a man who's discovered not just a cure, but purpose. Behind him, his assistant is boiling another batch, steam rising like incense. The customers leave smiling, lighter, buzzing quietly like telephone wires. Nobody questions the way their mouths go dry or how their thoughts race faster after each glass. They call it productivity. They call it relief. The South, beaten and broke, finds comfort in syrup. The North, smug and sleepless, orders by mail. For once, both sides agree on something. They want to feel better. They want to stop thinking. Coca leaves don't care which uniform you wore. They dissolve bitterness faster than time ever could. Late at night, when the streets go quiet, and even the saloons seem to exhale, Pemberton sits alone at his workbench. His morphine bottle lies empty. His new tonic glows amber in the lamplight. He stares at it the way a gambler stares at his last coin. Maybe this is how you fix a country, not with laws or politics, but with chemistry. He pours himself another glass and waits for that familiar lift, the gentle hum that makes the world seem softer. Outside, the crickets chirp, and for a few blissful minutes, there's no war, no pain, no ghosts, just the sound of fizz and the illusion that things are finally getting better. You watch him hunched over his workbench, sleeves rolled, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot, in that particular way that only men who've seen both battlefields and bankruptcy ever manage. John Stith Pemberton doesn't look like a man inventing a global empire. He looks like a man trying to keep his skeleton from shaking loose. His hands tremble as he measures out his powders, his vials, his strange brown syrups. The smell in the room is equal parts sugar, chemicals, and desperation. The black morphine bottle sits by his elbow, a small glass comfort he no longer bothers to hide. He calls it medicine, though it's been years since it healed anything. The saber wound that earned him the addiction has long scarred over, but pain has a way of finding new places to live. It's moved into his mind now, into the long nights when he stares at the ceiling and imagines his life might still amount to something. So he reaches for the same solution every time, a few drops of numbness swallowed like a prayer. He's supposed to be a man of science, but there's nothing scientific about the way he's mixing tonight. He's chasing a feeling, not a formula. Coca leaves from Peru, cola nuts from Africa, a bit of alcohol, a bit of spice, enough sugar to kill an elephant. The spoon clinks against glass like a metronome marking the tempo of his obsession. He mutters to himself, reciting proportions that will never appear in a textbook. What he's really trying to measure is peace. You can almost hear his thoughts as he stirs. The doctors say morphine will ruin him. The church says sin already has. But the South loves redemption stories, and he's decided his will come bottled. If he can find something that makes the body buzz without the guilt, maybe he can save himself and sell salvation by the ounce. It's the most American idea he's ever had. His assistant watches nervously from the doorway, pretending not to notice the shaking hands, the shallow breathing. The old man's genius comes with chaos attached. Some days he forgets to eat. Other days he forgets what year it is. But when he's mixing, there's a strange clarity in his madness, a rhythm in his routine. He swirls the liquid, holds it to the light, and smiles faintly. Maybe this one will do it, he whispers, to no one in particular. The first taste burns, the second tingles. By the third, his pupils widen, his pain softens, and a flicker of energy crawls up his spine. It's not just good, it's alive. He grabs a notebook, scribbles the words Coca-Cola syrup, and circles it twice. The handwriting is uneven, the letters trailing into each other like someone writing underwater. He doesn't notice. For the first time in years, he feels almost human. The irony is almost poetic. A wounded veteran searching for relief accidentally invents the thing that will one day keep half the nation comfortably dependent. He thinks he's found the cure to his own weakness, not realizing he's just bottled it for everyone else. But that's the thing about addiction. It loves company. Outside, Atlanta hums. The city is rebuilding itself, sweating out the war, pretending not to be broken. Inside, Pemberton drinks his latest concoction and imagines his fortune waiting on the other side of sunrise. He can already see his name printed on glass bottles, sold in pharmacies from New Orleans to New York. He pictures smiling families, grateful customers, a future where his pain becomes profit. The thought makes him laugh, then cough, then pour another glass. He drinks again, because it's better than the alternative. because morphine dulls the edges. But this new syrup makes the edges sparkle. His body knows it's a lie, but his brain doesn't care. It hums in agreement, whispering that he's close, that this mixture could be the one that saves him. The bubbles rise, the color deepens, and something that started as a coping mechanism begins to feel like destiny. Somewhere in the haze of that night, he leans back, eyes glassy, and murmurs, "This could change everything." He doesn't mean history or commerce or culture. He means himself. But history has a cruel sense of humor. The man trying to cure his own dependence has just created a new one for the world. The beaker hisses softly as it cools, and in that sound, you can almost hear the first fizz of Coca-Cola coming to life. You're living in an age when science is mostly theater. Men with impressive sideburns and questionable credentials are selling miracles in bottles, claiming they can cure everything from headaches to heartbreak. There's no FDA, no warning labels, just trust and a steady hand with a spoon. The world has cracked open after the Civil War, and everyone's scrambling to rebuild, to find purpose, to feel something. The factories hum, the cities swell, and somewhere between the promise of progress and the ache of fatigue, people start looking for shortcuts to happiness. Enter the coca leaf. It's plucked by workers in the Andes, chewed by locals for energy, and shipped north in barrels labeled medicinal. You can't patent a sunrise, but you can patent whatever chemical sparkle makes it feel that way. Chemists boil, strain, and distill it until the leaf's quiet buzz becomes a refined invitation to productivity. Cocaine isn't a dirty word yet, it's a scientific marvel, the polite cousin of sin. Doctors praise it, poets write about it, and pharmacists, like John Pemberton, see dollar signs glimmering between the bubbles. Then there's the cola nut, that bitter seed from the humid forests of West Africa. Traders call it the traveler's friend because it keeps you awake long enough to question mortality. It's caffeine with a side of mystique, and Western entrepreneurs can't resist turning it into powder and promise. Together, Coca and Cola form the most charming couple chemistry ever introduced. One smooth, euphoric, a flirtation with clarity. The other, jittery and excitable, the heartbeat of ambition. Mix them in a syrup, add sugar, and suddenly life feels manageable again. You have to remember, this is an era when exhaustion is fashionable. If you're not tired, you're not working hard enough. The Industrial Revolution has people burning daylight and kerosene, chasing the illusion of progress with half-open eyes. Factory whistles mark the hours like church bells, and everyone is praying for stamina. Pemberton isn't trying to get people high. He's trying to help them keep up. The fact that his tonic makes you feel like you've invented electricity is just a bonus. Coca leaves arrive in crates stamped with exotic symbols, the kind that make middle-class Americans feel worldly just by looking at them. Pharmacists handle them reverently, as if touching a relic from some enlightened civilization. Nobody's talking about addiction or overdoses. Those are problems for the poor, the immoral, or the French. In America, it's all about vitality, about staying upright long enough to prove you deserve the future that's being built around you. You can almost picture the first customers. Clerks hunched over ledgers, housewives with fading smiles, traveling salesmen who've been awake for 3 days straight. They walk into the pharmacy, dragging their fatigue like a second coat, and walk out feeling divine. Coca and Cola are their invisible companions, invisible but undeniable, whispering confidence through the bloodstream. It's not witchcraft, it's chemistry, or at least that's what they tell themselves. Pemberton sees the potential immediately. Two plants from opposite sides of the world, both buzzing with life, both perfectly legal. It's a miracle marriage in a bottle, a little global collaboration before globalization was even a word. He writes the ingredients on the label with the pride of a man who thinks he's found balance, the stimulation of the cola, the euphoria of the coca. It's not excess. He tells himself it's harmony. Nobody's worried about consequences because consequences are boring. What matters is how it feels right now. The first sip sharpens your senses. The second makes you ambitious. And by the third, you're reorganizing your kitchen drawers alphabetically. You can talk faster, think faster, live faster. The whole nation's addicted to momentum, and Pemberton's syrup fits the tempo perfectly. Of course, you can only call it progress if you ignore the shaking hands, the sleepless nights, the hollow euphoria that fades into emptiness. But in the 1,880 seconds, nobody's pausing to reflect. Reflection slows production. America's running on steam, caffeine, and denial. And if a pharmacist from Georgia happens to find a way to bottle that feeling, if a little cocaine and a few cola nuts make life feel like a promise again, well, who's complaining? In a world obsessed with motion, Coca-Cola isn't a beverage, it's a philosophy. You drink it, and you don't just feel awake, you feel right. The kind of right that makes you forget the chaos around you. The kind of right that keeps you coming back, one sip at a time. You walk into the pharmacy, and the first thing you notice is that it smells cleaner than a saloon and twice as judgmental. The pharmacist stands behind the counter like a priest with better lighting, ready to sell you something that promises energy, focus, and moral superiority. Coca-Cola isn't being marketed as a vice. It's being marketed as virtue with bubbles. You can drink it in front of your pastor, your children, and even your reflection without shame. There's no hangover, no staggering, no secret flask hidden under the pew. Just a cold glass of redemption, 5 cents a pour. The South, still wounded and trying to pretend it isn't, needs this. The sermons are long, the farms are failing, and the idea of temperance is catching on like a slow-moving virus. Whiskey becomes the enemy, and in its place rises something far more respectable, a drink that gives you energy instead of excuses. It doesn't slur your words, it makes them sparkle. Coca-Cola becomes the new communion, the polite man's rebellion against despair. The bottle might as well come with a halo printed on the label. Women adore it first. It's the kind of vice they're allowed to have, the kind that comes with lace and medical endorsement. Ads promise relief from fatigue, nerves, and female troubles, a phrase broad enough to mean anything from boredom to existential dread. Mothers sip it while sewing, servants sneak it between shifts, and every glass hums with the quiet thrill of getting away with something. It's liquid decorum, socially acceptable mischief, disguised as medicine. Doctors jump aboard too, prescribing it for headaches, melancholy, and general malaise, a condition half the country seems to have. They hand out samples like gospel tracts. You'll feel renewed, they say, which is true, if by renewed you mean wide-eyed and humming the wrong hymns. Patients start visiting the pharmacy as often as the church. The pharmacist becomes a kind of secular confessor, nodding sagely while pouring another dose of salvation into your glass. Children, naturally, become the next converts. It's sweet, it fizzes, it makes chores feel like sport. They drink it before school, after chores, between meals. Teachers praise their enthusiasm, unaware they're witnessing the first generation of caffeinated optimism. No one worries about what's inside, because everything inside is blessed by science. If the doctor says it's good, and the preacher doesn't object, then it must be wholesome. America is still too innocent to suspect that holiness might come with side effects. In the soda fountain, men who once met in bars now gather with their hats off, sipping modestly, trading gossip instead of gambling debts. The sound of laughter replaces the piano. You can almost feel the South patting itself on the back, drinking with dignity, feeling clean again. Coca-Cola becomes not just a beverage but an identity. It says you're civilized, modern, moral. You don't need bourbon when you have bubbles that lift your soul and steady your hands. Pemberton's creation travels quickly, each glass carrying both caffeine and a little absolution. It bridges the gap between faith and fatigue, between what people want and what they're allowed to want. A woman can have her excitement without scandal. A man can have his stimulation without sin. The line between medicine and miracle blurs into caramel-colored perfection. You stand at the counter watching the crowd, the preacher sipping discreetly before his sermon, the housewife with her gloves still on, the child whose feet don't touch the floor. Everyone leaves smiling, everyone feeling a little closer to grace. No one staggering out the door or confessing anything to anyone. They don't realize yet that addiction doesn't need a bottle and a brown bag. It can come in a glass with ice and polite conversation. The church bells outside ring faintly as you finish your drink. The day feels lighter, the air sharper, the world almost manageable. You don't thank chemistry for this feeling. You thank God. And somewhere in Atlanta, John Pemberton counts his coins, watching the faithful line up for another sip of the age. South's most blessed invention, a legal high dressed in Sunday clothes. You're 7, and life is simple. Chores, dust, and whatever small coin your parents trust you not to lose. You clutch that nickel like a passport to adulthood and march down the dirt road to the pharmacy, where the bell over the door jingles like a promise. The soda fountain gleams glass bottles lined up like jewels. A faint hiss in the air as syrup meets carbonation. The man behind the counter doesn't ask your age. He doesn't have to. Nobody thinks twice about giving a child the same thing the doctor takes for his nerves. You hoist yourself onto the stool, legs swinging. "One Coca-Cola," you say, with the confidence of a person who's heard grown-ups say it. The pharmacist grins and pours the syrup, the soda water fizzing like applause. The first sip is electric. It burns, it bubbles, it makes your scalp tingle in ways you don't have language for. Suddenly, you're sure you could outrun the horse tied up outside. The sweetness hits first, then something sharper, something thrilling and clean. You don't know it's the coca leaf whispering through your bloodstream, you just know the world feels wide awake for the first time. By sundown, you've reorganized the pantry, alphabetized the spice rack, and narrated the process to your confused mother in one continuous sentence. She watches you buzz around the kitchen and assumes you've finally developed a work ethic. "That drink does wonders," she says, smiling proudly. You beam back, hands trembling slightly as you declare your next project will involve regrouting the back porch bricks. Nobody suspects anything unnatural because the label says refreshing. And who could argue with that? At school, your teacher notices you no longer fall asleep during arithmetic. In fact, you finish the entire week's assignments before lunch and spend the rest of class explaining fractions to other children at twice the recommended decibel level. She tells your parents you've turned a corner. "Such energy," she says. "That tonic really builds character." The other students follow your lead, bringing nickels from home. The classroom slowly turning into a quiet experiment in mass stimulation. By now, Coca-Cola has become a ritual. You finish your chores faster just to earn another nickel. The pharmacist greets you like a regular, already pouring as you walk in. The foam rises to the rim, and you grab the glass with both hands, pretending you're part of something important. The adults nearby sip theirs too, but slower, as if savoring respectability. You're not savoring, you're sprinting. Your brain feels like it's learning every secret in the universe at once, and for the first time, boredom feels like a myth someone made up to scare children. The town approves. The preacher's wife tells your mother it's better than those devilish sweets. The doctor agrees it's medicinal, after all. Healthy stimulant, he calls it, scribbling prescriptions for the same drink to treat fatigue, sadness, even female distress. Nobody calls it a drug. That word is reserved for desperate people, the ones who don't wear clean collars. You're just a happy, healthy child with an extraordinary attention span and a slightly alarming pulse. By evening, you start to crash. It's subtle at first. Your mind races ahead, but your hands lag behind. Dinner feels boring, sleep impossible. You toss under the quilt, your heart still galloping long after the lights are out. You tell yourself you'll drink less tomorrow. You don't, because tomorrow morning, You wake up foggy, slower, heavy, until you remember the fizz, the clarity, the way the whole world sharpened with one sip. You tug on your boots, find another nickel, and head back to the pharmacy. Outside, a new sign hangs in the window. Drink Coca-Cola, delicious and refreshing. You grin. It's your favorite phrase. You climb onto the stool, the man pours the syrup, and everything inside you begins to hum again. The first addicted customers aren't men in back alleys or gamblers in saloons. They're the children, bright-eyed and unburdened, drinking the future one glass at a time, and nobody thinks to stop them, because the bottle says Coca-Cola, not problem. You live in an age when science looks like magic, and nobody bothers to check the ingredients list. Every breakthrough smells faintly of alcohol and hope. Cocaine isn't a scandal, yet it's a marvel. Doctors in crisp coats and thick mustaches swear by it. Pharmacists pour it with ceremony, and every newspaper ad calls it a miracle tonic. The word drug doesn't have teeth yet. It purrs instead, promising energy, clarity, and a new kind of sophistication. You're not indulging. You're participating in progress. Medical journals gush. One calls it a reliable stimulant for mental weariness. Another claims it invigorates the intellect without undesirable consequences. Nobody laughs at that last part. Cocaine is recommended for headaches, colds, indigestion, melancholia, and the general discomfort of being alive. It's prescribed to soldiers, housewives, clerks, and poets with equal enthusiasm. The science is sound because everyone who says it is a scientist, and everyone who uses it feels fantastic, at least for a while. Then there's Sigmund Freud, who writes essays about it the way other men write poetry about sunsets. He calls it a magical substance, a cure for depression, asthma, even shyness. In his letters, he praises the way it makes conversation sparkle and confidence bloom. He sends samples to his friends, the way someone might share a new brand of tea. They thank him, glowing, awake for days. No one thinks to ask what happens afterward. The hangover hasn't been invented yet. Pharmaceutical companies race to keep up. They market cocaine in powders, tablets, chewing gums, and syrups, each promising to make you sharper, cleaner, better. If there's a part of your life that feels dull, there's a product for that. Toothache? Cocaine. Stage fright? Cocaine. Boredom? Double dose. It's not just medicine, it's lifestyle maintenance. The advertisements feature elegant women smiling under parasols, businessmen shaking hands, children running with rosy cheeks. Keeps you well, the slogan says, and who could argue? The American Medical Association nods approvingly. It's in their journals, their lectures, their prescriptions. Cocaine is the new frontier, a symbol of scientific mastery. Doctors use it to numb pain during surgery, to treat morphine withdrawal, even to help patients adjust to the pace of modern life. You read these things in the papers and feel a little proud. Civilization, it seems, has finally cracked the code of human exhaustion. If a leaf from Peru and a seed from Africa can hold the secret to happiness, then maybe progress isn't a lie after all. Coca-Cola, of course, rides the wave. Pharmacists like Pemberton don't need to hide the cocaine content. It's a selling point. Stimulates the brain, one ad declares. Tones the nerves, says another. Parents buy it for their children, teachers recommend it for their students, and ministers sip it before sermons. The country is floating on a collective high, but calling it enlightenment. The drink becomes a metaphor for the era itself. Sweet, exciting, a little too good to be true. You sit at a soda fountain one afternoon, sipping your glass, and overhear a conversation between two men at the counter. One says his headaches have disappeared since he started drinking Coca-Cola daily. The other laughs and says his wife has never been happier. They clink glasses like businessmen sealing a deal, two strangers united by carbonation and chemistry. Outside, The sun glints off the windows, and the world feels faster, cleaner, invincible. It's easy to believe the experts. After all, they're the ones with degrees, journals, and impressive sideburns. If they say this powder can lift the nation, then who are you to doubt it? Skepticism is for cynics and the uneducated. The modern man trusts science, and the modern woman drinks her medicine with grace. Every sip, every sniff, every sparkling endorsement feels like a promise. The future will be bright, efficient, and awake. For now, there are no warnings, no whispers of danger, no need for self-control. Cocaine isn't a secret, it's a celebration. You don't think of it as indulgence any more than you think of breathing as optional. The doctors say it's fine. The journals say it's progress. Freud says it's joy. And you, sitting there with a bottle in your hand and your heart racing like industry itself, believe them completely. You're not an addict. You're enlightened. You wake up in a century drunk on optimism and cough syrup. The papers are full of new inventions, electric light, telephones, railroads, and every one of them hums with the same promise. Life can only get better from here. But progress comes with headaches, nerves, and the unsettling sense that the world is moving faster than your body knows how to follow. Luckily, help is everywhere. Pharmacies bloom on every corner, their shelves stacked high with glass bottles, each filled with syrup that promises to fix you. You don't even have to know what's wrong. The label will tell you. Every illness has a cure, and every cure comes with a slogan. For melancholy and impure thoughts, restores vitality to delicate women, revives the spirit. The language sounds biblical, except holier, because now salvation comes with dosage instructions. You see ads in the newspaper claiming that 1 spoonful can relieve despair, and 2 can make you run a small business. There are no side effects, only testimonials. Somewhere, between the fine print and the sugar, faith has been repackaged as pharmacology. Patent medicines rule the day, those mysterious concoctions guarded like family secrets. Nobody asks what's in them, because nobody wants to spoil the magic. Laudanum, opium, chloroform, it's all chemistry, and chemistry is the new gospel. Traveling salesmen pitch tonics from wagons, their voices booming across dusty streets. They promise vigor, confidence, even moral improvement. You watch as people line up, coins in hand, desperate to feel modern, to feel fixed. The snake oil salesman becomes the unofficial priest of the age, except his church serves samples. Then there's Coca-Cola, the polite alternative to all that showmanship. No shouting, no snake oil theatrics, no stage tricks with a dancing bear. Just a man in a pressed apron, standing behind a marble counter, pouring brown liquid into a glass with a hiss that sounds like refreshment itself. It's the cleaner choice, the civilized one. You can buy it without guilt, sip it under gaslight, and still make it to choir practice on time. The brilliance of Coca-Cola isn't that it's different, it's that it pretends to be ordinary. Where other medicines promise rebirth, this one just promises a pleasant afternoon. It doesn't claim to heal your soul or restore your marriage. It simply offers you a little bit of happiness, legally carbonated. You don't feel like a patient. You feel like a participant in progress. That's what makes it dangerous. You see people drink it and straighten up, as if the bubbles themselves remind them how to smile again. Housewives sip it between chores. Clerks gulp it before shifts. Ministers sneak a glass before Sunday service. It makes everyone brighter, chattier, slightly more alive. And because it's sold over the counter instead of out of a wagon, nobody calls it a vice. It's the friendliest addiction in America served with a straw. Every brand wants what Coca-Cola has: trust. You can sell anything if you make it look respectable. So, the pharmacies polish their counters, hang lace curtains, and talk about purity, while the shelves glisten with bottles of liquid chaos. Cocaine, morphine, and alcohol hide behind words like invigorating and soothing. You don't need a prescription for paradise. You just need the right label. The newspapers run full-page ads showing smiling families, children in sailor suits, mothers pouring tonic from delicate glass bottles. The same kids who once played with sticks in the dirt now drink chemistry before breakfast. America doesn't think it's hooked, it thinks it's healed. And Coca-Cola, with its bubbles and sweetness, fits neatly into that illusion. It's the perfect product for people who don't want to admit they're medicating themselves. You sip it too, of course. Everyone does. The fizz hits your tongue, the taste is sharp and kind, and you think about how good it feels to be alive in such a modern age. The world no longer hurts quite as much. The air feels lighter, the day easier. You don't notice that your hands shake when the glass is empty. You just order another, convinced that progress has never tasted so good. In the era of patent medicines and promises, nobody questions the cost of comfort. You don't ask what's inside the bottle because you don't really want to know. You just want to believe that the future can be bottled, sweetened, and poured over ice, and for 5 cents, it can. You imagine the journey of a leaf like it's an epic poem. It begins high in the Andes, where the air is thin and the coca plant clings to terraces like a stubborn neighbor. Farmers pick the leaves by hand, their fingers stained with a green so vivid it looks like a promise. Those leaves, quiet, bitter, and ancient, are bundled and packed into sacks, the way secrets are packed into family attics. They go to market, then to ports, then onto steamers with names you half recognize. From postcards, from Peru to New Orleans, from the jungle to the polite shelves of an American pharmacy, the coca leaf travels as if it belongs everywhere and nowhere at once. When the leaves arrive in a northern port, they don't come with fanfare. They arrive wrapped in plain burlap and labeled medicinal. Customs clerks glance at the paperwork, nod appreciatively at the Latinized names, and stamp the crate through with the same board efficiency they use on other imports. There is no federal agency hovering in the background. There is only paperwork and plausible signatures. If something smells like commerce and reads like science, people assume it behaves like commerce and science. You understand quickly that plausible deniability is a valuable export, perhaps more valuable than the leaves themselves. Inside the pharmaceutical shop, or the small laboratory where the mixing happens, the process looks equal parts chemistry and theater. There are glass jars with handwritten labels, amber flasks catching the light, a low hiss from a burner. Men in aprons move with theatrical seriousness, stirring and straining, smelling and tasting, as if improvising a symphony that must both heal and hum. They call it an extract. They call it a compound. They talk about alkaloids with the same reverence a gardener uses for soil. All of it sounds impressive, and impressive words are very useful when you're trying to sell comfort. The real trick is the language. Coca extract sounds like tea. Decocainized sounds like safety. Manufacturers love words that soothe merchants and inspectors alike. So the crude green leaves get transformed, handled gently enough that the curious mind can call it refinement, and the skeptical eye can file it away as tradecraft. A chemist in a white coat will say, confidently, that the active ingredient has been reduced to acceptable levels. The pharmacist will print the phrase on a label with a flourish. The public will read it and feel reassured, and that reassurance is part of the product. There are men in the background who prefer the shadows, traders, brokers, the kind of middlemen who like contracts and vague promises more than bright lights. They arrange shipments, stamp customs forms, and make sure invoices look neat. They insure crates, bribe an official when necessary, and always keep their accounts in triplicate. They tell stories about storms at sea and about the intrigue of foreign ports. The stories are romantic, but the work is logistics. The world that supplies medicine is also the world that tolerates a little mystery, because mystery helps sales. Sometimes the extract arrives already refined from abroad, a dark syrup spooned into demijohns, ready for bottling. Sometimes American labs do the heavy lifting, turning leaf into something that tastes familiar when mixed with sugar and carbonated water. Either way, the product that sits on the pharmacist's shelf is the result of 1,000 small compromises between transparency and practicality, between curiosity and commerce. You sip it, and you taste the final compromise: warm sugar, bright fizz, and the faint memory of a wilderness someone else owns. The absence of oversight matters because it gives people room to pretend. No federal agents are standing in the doorway demanding samples. Instead, there are editors who print testimonials in glossy columns and doctors who sign off with signatures that look like promises. It's a century when expertise is a brand, and brands are trusted. You don't ask too many questions because the answers would complicate the pleasure of a cold glass on a summer afternoon. From the shipping manifests to the soda jerks at the counter, the story of how cocaine entered cola is a lesson in human optimism and administrative inertia. A leaf becomes an extract becomes a syrup becomes a social ritual, and nobody writes a great manual explaining how the stew was made. Instead, you get labels, smiles, and a tidy line of receipts. The chemistry remains murky to most, which suits everyone involved: exporters, importers, chemists, and customers. When you think about it, every bottle contains a little international adventure and a lot of collective shrugging. That's the other ingredient nobody mentions: a culture that prefers belief to doubt. You pour a glass, feel the fizz, and in that instant, the world is simpler. The crates with foreign stamps disappear into the past, and you're left with the very American illusion that progress tastes refreshing. You see the first Coca-Cola advertisements, printed in delicate serif letters and framed by smiling faces. The words hum with optimism: delicious, refreshing, invigorating. It's not medicine exactly, but it's not indulgence either. It sits perfectly between virtue and vice, the drinkable equivalent of saying, "I'm fine, really." The copywriters know their audience. They know you don't want to be cured, you want to feel cured. You don't want healing, you want happiness with carbonation. The ads never mention the coca leaf, not directly. Instead, they whisper about pep and vitality, words that sound like personality traits rather than chemical reactions. They promise clear minds and cheerful hearts. The message is elegant. This isn't what sinners drink in saloons. This is what good people drink when they're tired of pretending to be fine. Housewives, clerks, ministers, even school teachers, all shown smiling faintly, as if they've just remembered how to enjoy things again. You're not drinking to forget. You're drinking to participate. The genius of it all lies in tone. There's no scandal, no moral warning, just joy sold by the glass. America, newly sober and eager for something to replace whiskey, doesn't need convincing. The war is over, the world is loud, and everyone is a little tired. Coca-Cola slides into that exhaustion like a polite miracle. It's not a sin if you drink it at noon. It's not vice if it's sold in pharmacies. It's medicine for your energy, your focus, your disposition. A socially acceptable high wrapped in a bow tie. Children are some of the best customers. They don't know what fatigue is, but they like bubbles and sweetness. They beg their parents for nickels, crowd around soda fountains, and bounce on stools as the fizz hits their noses. The parents smile indulgently. Better this than whiskey. Better this than cigarettes. Nobody notices that the kids leave the counter ready to run a 3-minute mile. It's good for them, mothers say, keeps their spirits up. Teachers notice the sudden enthusiasm in class but chalk it up to springtime. America is raising its first caffeinated generation, and everyone calls it progress. You walk past the posters tacked up in shop windows, women in parasols, sipping from delicate glasses, men in starched collars tipping their hats. A slogan underneath that says, "Drink Coca-Cola relieves fatigue." The line between marketing and scripture blurs. Even the language sounds holy, promising renewal, awakening, a small sip of eternal youth. For a country that's learned to worship productivity, this is communion. You don't rest anymore, you recharge. Behind the counter, the soda jerks perform like small-time magicians. They pour syrup, pull the lever, and create a spectacle of bubbles that seems to glow under the light. The glass slides toward you, sweating and perfect. You take a sip and feel the rush, the small, bright pulse of something almost divine. The man behind the counter grins. "Told you it helps," he says, as if he's just given you insider knowledge on how to survive modern life. You nod, because it does. Doctors endorse it, newspapers praise it, and neighbors recommend it with the same enthusiasm once reserved for church revivals. It's the taste of self-improvement, the illusion that maybe you can keep up with the century speeding around you. Coca-Cola becomes not just a drink, but a performance of optimism. Every swallow says, "I'm part of the future." And for 5 cents, who wouldn't want to be? The ads grow bolder, brighter, more playful. "Drink Coca-Cola and feel good," they declare, as if feeling good is a patriotic duty. Happiness is no longer something you earn, it's something you can purchase by the glass. The marketing doesn't need to lie. It just needs to remind you how good it feels to believe. By the time you leave the pharmacy, the world looks lighter. The street feels cleaner, the sky more awake. You hum a little tune you don't remember knowing, and you start to think maybe everything really is going to be fine. You don't realize that the joy isn't yours, it's rented, bottled, and sweetened, but you don't care. For now, it's happiness that fits neatly in your hand, and you're already thinking about your next glass. You step into the pharmacy, and the air smells faintly of sugar, disinfectant, and progress. Behind the counter sits the altar of modern America, the soda fountain. It's marble and polished brass, gleaming like something half religious. You don't need a prescription, just a nickel and a thirst for something that feels like the future. The pharmacist, who's less healer now and more bartender in disguise, pumps a measure of dark syrup into a glass, then pulls the lever. A hiss escapes, sharp and alive, as carbonated water bursts from the tap. The bubbles race upward, like they're trying to escape the century itself. You watch him stir the mixture with practiced grace. The brown syrup swirls and lightens, the fizz builds, the glass chills. It's no longer medicine, it's theater. The whole act, the pour, the sound, the anticipation, is part of the spell. You take a seat at the counter, feet dangling from the stool, and the pharmacist slides the glass toward you. You take your first sip, and for a brief second, it feels like the entire world just learned how to sparkle. At first, Coca-Cola was sold as a tonic, a syrup that invigorates and restores. But nobody likes swallowing medicine. People like rituals, small pleasures that make the day feel civilized. And the soda fountain, that marble monument to refreshment, becomes the place where the ritual lives. The drink is sweeter now, lighter, more social. You don't need a headache or heartbreak to justify it. You just need 5 minutes between errands. The fountain is a stage for conversation. The soda jerk wears his bow tie like a badge of honor, trading jokes with customers as he stirs, shakes, and pours. Teenagers giggle over shared straws. Businessmen debate politics with a fizzing glass in hand, and mothers use it as an excuse to pause between chores. The bubbling sound fills the shop, punctuated by laughter and the faint pop of bottle caps. It's a symphony of small escapes, each glass promising a little reprieve from whatever's outside the door, and you feel it immediately. The sweetness hits your tongue, the tingling carbonation dances up your nose, and that familiar clarity creeps in like someone wiped the dust off your thoughts. The fatigue that clung to your shoulders all morning slides away. You sit up straighter. The world seems sharper, lighter, easier. You tell yourself it's the sugar, the freshness, the joy of company. But somewhere underneath, there's that other ingredient humming quietly, the secret spark that keeps you coming back. The soda fountain becomes a national sanctuary. Temperance preachers can't scold you for it. Doctors can't warn you against it. And no one has to sneak it under the table. It's not sin, it's science with a cherry on top. You can be refined and still feel alive. In a world that's tired of sermons and scandals, Coca-Cola offers something better. Reliable happiness in liquid form. You can see the transformation spreading. Pharmacies that once smelled of antiseptic now hum with chatter and laughter. Every town has its fountain. Every fountain has its regulars. And every regular swears this drink is just what they need to get through the day. It's not quite a drug, not quite a dessert, something perfectly in between. The respectable thrill. America learns to chase euphoria without shame, and the soda fountain is where it's dispensed. You drain your glass, already feeling the pulse of energy in your fingertips. The world outside is still messy and slow, but inside this bright little shop, everything feels manageable. The fizz lingers in your throat, and for a few seconds, you feel like you've found the formula for contentment. You slide another nickel across the counter. The pharmacist grins, pours another glass, and the hiss fills the room again. It's a sound that becomes part of the national heartbeat, the fizz before the sip, the promise before the rush. The medicine bottle is gone, replaced by a stool, a straw, and a ritual that no one questions. You don't think about ingredients, or origins, or what exactly makes your heart beat faster. You just drink, smile, and wait for the bubbles to reach your brain. Atlanta doesn't so much adopt Coca-Cola as fall headfirst into it. The city, still wearing the scars of war under its Sunday best, finds something it can finally agree on. This syrupy miracle that makes everything feel less heavy. The heat no longer feels oppressive. The workday doesn't drag as much, and your mind hums with a rhythm that feels suspiciously like progress. The soda fountains are packed. The pharmacists are smiling, and the polite citizens of the South are discovering that euphoria tastes like caramel and carbon dioxide. It starts in Atlanta, naturally, where John Pemberton's legacy lingers in every bubbling glass. Then it spreads outward, slowly at first, like gossip, then all at once, like gossip that's true. Mississippi picks it up next, then Alabama, then Tennessee. Within a few years, you can't walk through a southern town without hearing that familiar fizz. The clink of glasses becomes a regional anthem. Doctors prescribe it, teachers endorse it, ministers sip it between hymns. No one questions what's in it, because the South has had enough questioning to last a lifetime. This isn't rebellion, it's relief, and relief doesn't need justification. You can picture it. A porch in Georgia, the air so thick with humidity, you could ladle it. A man in suspenders sits back in his chair, takes a sip, and sighs like he's discovered forgiveness in liquid form. His wife drinks hers slower, trying to appear ladylike, but her eyes are brighter than usual. Down the street, children run with bottles in their hands, their laughter faster, sharper, edged with something that sounds like caffeine and confidence. The town is alive in a way it hasn't been in decades. You don't call that addiction, you call it recovery. By 1890, Coca-Cola isn't a beverage anymore. It's a habit wrapped in hospitality. Pharmacies are the new social clubs, where men in starched collars debate politics with foaming glasses in hand, and women linger by the counter under the pretense of shopping for liniment. They're not buying medicine, they're buying permission to feel good in public. The South, always balancing sin and sanctity, finds the perfect loophole. A drug that comes with a straw, served cold, and entirely respectable. There's a kind of poetic justice in it. The North has industry, factories, railroads that slice through mountains. The South has sweetness, storytelling, and now, the most addictive drink in America. We may have lost the war, people joke, but we've got Coca-Cola. It's said half in jest, half in triumph. Because the South may not have seceded, but in this quiet chemical rebellion, It's found something better: collective elevation. They don't call it intoxication, they call it enthusiasm. By now, every small town pharmacy stocks it. The soda jerks become local celebrities, pulling levers like magicians, conjuring fizz and laughter. People crowd the counters after church, after school, after funerals. There's no occasion too solemn or sacred for a drink that makes you feel momentarily invincible. Newspapers start running stories about this delightful southern beverage, spreading its reputation to the rest of the country. But down here, it already feels like old family tradition. You can imagine the scene inside a Mississippi drugstore around noon. The place hums with chatter, the clatter of glass against marble. Farmers, clerks, even children perched on stools too tall for their legs, all sharing the same secret smile, the one that says, "This is ours." Nobody knows they're chemically wired for happiness. Nobody cares. The heat outside could melt a clock, but inside, the bubbles keep. Everything moving, keep the mind bright and the body loyal. The South has found its rhythm again, and it fizzes. People talk faster, work longer, dream bigger. It's not a revolution, it's carbonation with a cause. By the time anyone up north notices what's happening, it's too late. The syrup has crossed borders, bottled optimism spreading like gossip in polite company. The polite South has weaponized pleasure, and its secret weapon is a drink you can buy for a nickel. You sip yours slowly, the glass cold against your hand, the sweetness coating your tongue. Around you, the town hums with that same energy, that same invisible current that links every drinker in every parlor, porch, and pharmacy. Nobody calls it addiction. They call it progress. They call it refreshment. And as far as the South is concerned, that's the same thing. You can feel the decade humming. It's the 1,890 seconds, and everything in America seems to be vibrating a little too fast. Trains are faster, factories are louder, and people, somehow, are busier than ever. There's a kind of jittery optimism in the air, and cocaine is the invisible rhythm keeping the beat. Doctors call it progress. Newspapers call it a marvel. No one calls it what it actually is: a nationwide buzz with excellent branding. Pharmacies are overflowing with tonics, elixirs, and powders, all promising to fix whatever modern life has broken. You can buy cocaine in lozenges, inject it for your nerves, or rub it into your gums to feel refreshed. Housewives recommend it to each other in hushed tones, the same way they once shared pie recipes. It keeps the spirits up, they say, and they mean it literally. The working class embraces it too. It's cheaper than therapy and faster than prayer. Coca-Cola, of course, is the gentlest entry point, the sugar-coated gateway to a nation learning that happiness can be manufactured. The scientists are thrilled. Cocaine is on the cover of medical journals, praised as a cure for melancholy, indigestion, and moral fatigue. One paper calls it the most perfect stimulant yet discovered, as if they're talking about electricity. Another claims it makes the user alert and amiable, which is an elegant way of describing mania. Everyone wants in on it. Pharmacists, poets, even preachers. The future, they say, tastes like progress, and progress comes with a fizz. Entrepreneurs multiply like bubbles in a freshly poured glass. Every small-town chemist wants to bottle his own miracle. Coca-Cola isn't the only syrup in town anymore. It just happens to be the friendliest. Others advertise even stronger formulas. Names like Vin Mariani and Dr. Brown's Brain Invigorator fill the papers, each one a little more confident in its claims. The nation's bloodstream becomes a marketplace. If you can drink it, sniff it, or swallow it, someone will sell it. But then the edges start to fray. Patients begin showing up at doctors' offices with symptoms nobody wants to name. The sleeplessness is one thing. The tremors are harder to explain. People start hearing things, seeing things, believing in things that don't exist. Church ladies, once proud champions of moral restraint, begin sweating through their lace collars during choir practice. A banker from Savannah reportedly buys a horse because it looked sad. A school teacher in Birmingham claims she can taste colors. The newspapers, always eager to pivot, begin to use a new word: overstimulation. Coca-Cola executives don't panic. They adjust. Quietly, the company begins reducing the Coca content, telling no one. The goal isn't to eliminate the buzz, just to smooth it. Like any good Southern host, they want their guests comfortable, not confessing their sins to the wallpaper. The formula changes in slow increments, subtle enough that no one notices. You still feel good after a glass, just less likely to write a novel about the sensation. By the turn of the century, cocaine's halo starts to slip. The same scientists who once praised it now write cautious editorials about misuse. Doctors begin using words like habit forming. The newspapers follow suit, running moral panic stories about wild-eyed addicts and collapsing families. America, as always, moves from celebration to condemnation with remarkable speed. But by then, the damage is done. A generation has grown up chasing that peculiar kind of joy, the kind that comes on fast, leaves faster, and demands to be bought again tomorrow. You sit at the soda fountain, watching the bubbles rise in your glass, and you can feel it, the ghost of something still alive in the syrup. The rush is gentler now, more polite, but it's there. Coca-Cola has learned the art of subtlety. The secret ingredient isn't just chemistry. It's nostalgia for that first dizzy wave of optimism. You drink, smile faintly, and convince yourself it's just the sugar. But deep down, you know the truth. America's not addicted to cocaine anymore. It's addicted to the memory of how good it felt. You start hearing whispers before anyone admits there's a problem. Doctors, those same men who once handed out cocaine like breath mints, begin to clear their throats awkwardly during consultations. Patients are coming in with tremors, night sweats, and vivid stories about things that don't exist. Mothers complain that their children can't sit still long enough to finish supper. Clerks report headaches that hum behind their eyes like a swarm of bees. But no one points to the glass bottles lined up in every shop window. That would mean looking too closely at the thing that's holding the country together. The sweet, fizzy reward that makes exhaustion feel like energy. The diagnoses start piling up, but the names all sound harmless enough. Overstudy, excessive excitement, urban fatigue. The doctors invent new phrases every month, as if vocabulary can cover for guilt. A pharmacist in Georgia blames bad air. A teacher in Alabama says it's nerves from reading too much. Everyone's got an explanation, as long as it's not the one sitting right in their hand, sweating condensation onto their palm. Coca-Cola can't be the problem. It's too civilized, too polished, too beloved. It's what people drink instead of drinking. You can't call it sin if it comes with bubbles. Parents notice it first, even if they won't say so aloud. Their children, once sleepy and obedient, have started bouncing through the house like wind-up toys. Homework turns into opera. Bedtime becomes a negotiation. The kids are bright-eyed, chatty, impossible to tire. So full of life, the neighbors say admiringly. So very spirited. Nobody uses the word addicted. It doesn't belong to clean, church-going families. That word is for the kind of people who smell like whiskey and make eye contact too long. Adults are no better. You see men pacing at night, muttering about projects they'll never finish. Wives sitting up in bed, listening to the sound of restless feet on wooden floors. Church pews are filled with people whispering prayers under their breath, while their hands shake just enough to rattle hymnals. But on Sunday afternoon, they're all back at the soda fountain, lined up for the same glass of calm they swear helps them sleep. It's a loop: exhaustion, indulgence, denial, an entire region living off a high it refuses to name. The newspapers start to notice too, but cautiously. They run polite pieces about the health effects of excessive tonic consumption. There's talk of moderation, a word that makes everyone feel better without changing anything. Editors frame the issue as etiquette, not danger. Drink responsibly, they say, as if anyone can resist the promise of feeling awake in a tired century. Advertisements still run beside the warnings, promising gentle stimulation and pure refreshment. America is getting the jitters, and Coca-Cola is still smiling from every page. Doctors begin to divide into camps. Some defend the drink as harmless, a mild restorative suited to our modern pace. Others whisper about dependency, about patients who panic when they skip their daily glass. A few try to raise alarms, but their peers call them hysterical. Science, after all, invented this miracle. To question it now feels like heresy. Better to pretend the symptoms come from stress, the weather, or the mystery illness of being alive too long. Mothers, meanwhile, keep pouring Coke for their children, partly out of habit, partly out of faith. They've been told it's medicinal, good for digestion, good for moods, good for everything. And even when they start to see the changes, the flushed cheeks, the shaking hands, they cling to the ritual. Because if Coca-Cola is dangerous, then so is love, so is comfort, so is every quiet moment they've tried to make a little easier. You see it most clearly in the evenings. Families gathered on porches, bottles sweating in their hands, laughing a little too loudly, eyes a little too bright. The sun sets, the crickets start, and someone yawns too early, too tired. They talk about work, about the crops, about how the world's getting faster every year. Nobody mentions the strange dreams, the trembling, the creeping unease that follows the sweetness. You can't blame the thing that makes you happy. You can't question what keeps you upright. So, the country keeps drinking, the symptoms keep spreading, and somewhere, buried beneath the laughter and the fizz, a quiet thought begins to form, one nobody dares to speak yet. What if the cure everyone's been chasing was never a cure at all? You meet Asa Candler on a bright Atlanta morning, the kind of man who looks like he could sell sunlight to the sky. He's not a pharmacist, not really a scientist either. He's something rarer. In the 1,890 seconds, he's a businessman who understands emotion better than medicine. Where others see syrup, he sees empire. Coca-Cola isn't just a drink to him. It's a feeling, a mood, a perfectly legal shortcut to optimism. He doesn't need to understand chemistry to recognize magic when he tastes it. Candler buys the rights from Pemberton's crumbling legacy the way a fox buys a henhouse quickly and without hesitation. He finds the paperwork tangled in debt and half-promises, but buried inside is the formula that makes people hum like machinery. For a few $100s and a flair for persuasion, he takes control. Overnight, the man who used to sell pharmaceuticals becomes the prophet of pleasure. He doesn't invent anything new. He just polishes what's already gleaming. Candler takes Pemberton's erratic invention and gives it discipline. He standardizes the recipe, builds a factory, and teaches America how to crave. No more small batch uncertainty. No more messy mixing behind the counter. Now the syrup arrives, sealed, branded, ready to be poured in every pharmacy from Savannah to Street Louis. It's consistency, reliability, addiction with a logo. Advertising becomes his battlefield, and he fights with charm instead of truth. Every poster, every slogan, every calendar he hands out hums with promise. Drink Coca-Cola, they say. Delicious and refreshing. That's all anyone needs to know. He doesn't talk about the coca leaf, the cola nut, or the peculiar sparkle behind the eyes after a few sips. Why mention ingredients when the outcome sells itself? Customers don't want to read, they want to feel. And what they feel is joy in a bottle. You start to see the posters everywhere. Ladies in corsets lifting glasses, gentlemen tipping their hats, children grinning mid-sip. They all look healthy, happy, slightly transcendent. Coca-Cola isn't being sold as a stimulant anymore, it's being sold as civility. It's the respectable drink for respectable people, the churchgoer's champagne, the office clerk's afternoon savior. The advertisement doesn't say it cures headaches anymore. It just quietly implies it cures life. Candler doesn't need to lie. He just edits. He removes the word medicine from the equation and replaces it with refreshment. The same way he reduces the mention of coca without actually removing it. The genius of capitalism isn't honesty, it's confidence. If you say something brightly enough, people won't squint at the shadows. And Asa Candler shines bright. Under his rule, Coca-Cola becomes unstoppable. He gives out free samples at fairs, sponsors city events, sends branded clocks to every pharmacy that agrees to stock his syrup. He trains soda jerks to ask, "Have a Coke?" like it's an invitation to friendship. Within a few years, Coca-Cola isn't just a drink, it's a reflex. People crave it without knowing why. Mothers serve it at picnics, businessmen drink it during meetings, and children beg for it like it's part of growing up. The South has never seen anything so intoxicating that still fits inside Sunday etiquette. Meanwhile, the profits climb, the syrup spreads, and Candler watches his empire bloom with the calm satisfaction of a man who knows he's selling something people can't quit. Behind the marble counters and brass fixtures, America hums with the same frequency as his drink, busy, awake, convinced it's heading somewhere glorious. Nobody cares what's inside the glass. They care how it feels. And that's the trick, isn't it? Coca-Cola doesn't need to sell ingredients, only identity. It's not a mixture of coca leaves and cola nuts anymore. It's a promise disguised as refreshment. You're not drinking syrup. You're drinking progress, civility, success. You're drinking the version of yourself you wish the world could see. Candler doesn't call it addiction. He calls it loyalty. He doesn't call it marketing. He calls it belief. And by the time the century turns, Coca-Cola has become America's first bottled faith, a fizzy gospel preached from soda fountains coast to coast. You don't question it. You just take another sip, the bubbles rising, the sweetness settling, and think to yourself how good it feels to be alive, modern, and just a little bit high. You wake up with a dull ache just behind your eyes, the kind that feels like you've misplaced part of your personality. It's nothing serious. You tell yourself just a little fatigue, maybe the weather. But by mid-morning, the world feels heavier than usual. The air's too thick, the sound's too sharp. Then you remember. You haven't had your Coke. You walk to the pharmacy, half dizzy, half determined, and the moment that fizz hits your tongue, it's like someone turns the lights back on. The headache melts, the mood lifts, and suddenly you're ready to forgive everyone again, including yourself. You don't think of it as addiction. You think of it as balance. That's how it starts. One missed glass feels like punishment. One full one feels like salvation. You notice it's not just you. The soda fountains packed by noon, every stool taken, people leaning against the counter like parishioners waiting for communion. The soda jerk doesn't even ask for orders anymore, he just starts pouring. Housewives stop by between errands, factory workers line up before shifts, school teachers sip theirs while grading papers. The whole city hums with the same rhythm. Fizz, relief, repeat. Nobody uses words like craving or withdrawal. They call it a refreshing pick-me-up, the phrase rolling off tongues like prayer. The pharmacists are struggling to keep up. The syrup deliveries can't match the demand. Rumors start that certain towns are rationing. People laugh it off, but the laughter sounds thin. When shipments arrive, there's a hush of reverence, like holy water being restocked. You tell yourself it's just good business. Everyone deserves a little indulgence. It's not like whiskey, it's clean, it's social, it's science. That's the beauty of it. Coca-Cola has managed to make dependence look dignified. By now, the habit has rules. You drink one before work to get going, another after lunch to stay sharp, maybe a third in the afternoon when your mind starts to drift and your patience evaporates. It's practical, Even patriotic, how else are you supposed to keep up with the new century? The world's speeding up, and you're just matching its pace. If anyone points out that your hands shake a little, or that your laughter comes too quick, you smile and say you've just been working hard. At home, it becomes routine. Housewives sneak an extra glass while scrubbing the floors, calling it energy. Children beg for sips, pretending it's just the taste they love. Even the elderly take it for the nerves, which sounds respectable enough to make everyone feel comfortable. You're part of a movement, not a mistake. It's not dependency if everyone else is doing it. There are whispers, of course. A few doctors mention overstimulation, whatever that means. Some preacher in Alabama calls it a secular spirit, which makes the congregation laugh and order another round after service. The newspapers still print Coca-Cola ads beside the health columns, both claiming to know what's best for the body. The truth is, no one wants to question something that makes them feel this good. The country's still shaking off the century's aches, its wars, its fears, its long afternoons, and this little brown drink is the closest thing to peace it's ever found. You start to notice other things too. The lines at the soda fountains grow longer every month. People talk faster, sleep less. The word tired begins to sound old-fashioned, like a symptom of weakness. When someone claims they don't drink Coke, you don't trust them. Who doesn't want to feel alive? Who willingly chooses dullness in a world fizzing with possibility? In the quiet hours before bed, you sometimes wonder what would happen if you stopped. Just for a day. You tell yourself you could, but you never do. There's always a reason, always an excuse, a meeting, a headache, a chore that needs doing. The glass finds your hand the way prayer finds the devout, automatically. By now, you're not sure what you'd be without it. The sweetness lingers in your blood, the buzz hums in your bones. The drink has become something deeper than habit, its identity. And as you sit at the counter, the bubbles rising and the sound of laughter spilling through the air, you realize nobody's calling it addiction because nobody wants to stop. Everyone's found a way to be just this side of dependent, and it feels too good to give up. You take another sip. The ache fades. Everything feels right. Again. You see the ads first. Soft pastels, glowing smiles, children holding bottles like sacred relics. The slogans promise purity, refreshment, virtue. Coca-Cola, the drink of moderation, the alternative to sin. The bottle glints like stained glass under the summer sun, and in that reflection, Asa Candler sees his greatest revelation yet. He doesn't need to sell chemistry, he needs to sell morality. It's a stroke of genius disguised as decency. The country's tangled up in the temperance movement, and everyone's arguing about the evils of alcohol. Ministers thunder from pulpits about damnation in a bottle. Candler listens, nods solemnly, and quietly realizes there's a gap in the market the size of heaven. If whiskey leads to ruin, then Coca-Cola will lead to redemption, carbonated salvation for the weary soul. He positions it as the drink of virtue, the indulgence that keeps your conscience clean. No hangovers, no sin, no shame, just bubbles and the faint hum of divine approval. The advertisements evolve like a sermon in print. You see women in lace gloves smiling beatifically as they pour Coke into dainty glasses. Children sit on picnic blankets, their faces glowing with cherubic light, eyes wide as if they've glimpsed paradise through carbonation. Drink of purity, one ad reads, the perfect companion to wholesome living. The irony is so thick, it could be bottled too. Because behind those soft smiles, behind those church socials and Sunday picnics, everyone's heart is beating just a little too fast. Ministers take the bait beautifully. Some call it God's alternative to the saloon. Churches start hosting ice cream socials where the featured guest isn't scripture, it's syrup. Deacons who once scowled at liquor now sip from tall, sweating glasses between sermons. The lines between virtue and vice blur, then vanish. Candler doesn't have to convince them with science. He just gives them a story to believe in. Coca-Cola becomes not just a drink, but a moral decision, a way to be modern without being wicked. Mothers fall for it next. They're the moral gatekeepers of the household, and they trust what the church trusts. They read the ads in ladies' magazines, see words like invigorating, safe, and pure. They like the sound of those words. They sound responsible, almost maternal. So they buy it for themselves, for their children, for their husbands after long days at work. The kitchen shelf fills with bottles that promise energy and good health. The fizz becomes part of the family soundtrack. The house smells faintly of sweetness, and everyone seems just a little more cheerful. The church ladies, though they're the real believers, they sip Coke after choir practice, their chatter rising faster than the hymns they just sang. They swap recipes for Coke cakes and Coke punch, calling it a touch of modernity. They host socials where the punch bowl fizzes like holy water, and every woman feels just a little more blessed, a little more radiant, a little less tired. By the end of the afternoon, their laughter rings off the walls, bright and unstoppable. The men smile approvingly. Such good Christian women, they say. What they don't know is that those good Christian women haven't blinked in an hour. Candler, of course, knows exactly what he's done. He's built a bridge between capitalism and faith, a drink that sanctifies indulgence. He doesn't have to hide the cocaine, it hides itself behind propriety, behind the soft murmur of prayer and the rustle of hymnals. Coca-Cola is no longer a guilty pleasure. It's moral refreshment. Each sip is an act of self-control, a reminder that you're better than the people in the saloon across the street. By the end of the decade, the church bulletin board advertises Coca-Cola alongside revival meetings. Join us for fellowship and refreshment. It says, the word refreshment now, carrying the weight of both caffeine and salvation. Mothers buy it by the crate. Ministers sip it with conviction. And nobody seems to notice that the line between righteousness and addiction has been quietly carbonated out of existence. You sit in the pews one Sunday, watching as the congregation fans themselves, eyes bright, hearts racing. The pastor takes a sip from a discreet glass at his podium, clears his throat, and launches into a sermon about temptation. Everyone nods, alert and inspired. Outside, the sun beats down, and somewhere nearby, a delivery wagon rattles past, full of crates stamped with red script and holiness. The church bells ring, the congregation hums, and America's most devout are wired to the gills, saved, sanctified, and blissfully unaware that their salvation comes with a side of cocaine. You live in a world where everything dangerous comes with a polite label. It's the Gilded Age, and excess has learned how to smile. Nothing's really clean, but everything looks immaculate. The streets glimmer with ambition, the shop windows glitter with promises, and every vice has been rebottled, relabeled, and blessed with a new font. The city hums like it's running on caffeine and denial, which, coincidentally, it is. Doctors call it progress. Ladies call it refinement. Men call it enterprise. And the country calls it Tuesday. Cocaine, morphine, opium, these aren't sins anymore. They're solutions. The apothecary shelves sparkle with bottles that read like lullabies. You can buy your poison by the ounce and still feel respectable because it comes in glass, not a syringe. You don't hide your habit. You display it on the vanity. Opium has been reborn as laudanum, the genteel choice for the overwhelmed Victorian soul. It's sold to everyone, grieving widows, nervous students, poets with too much feeling. You can sip it from a teacup and call it reflection. Morphine gets a makeover too, wrapped in maternal marketing and sold as Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, a godsend for colicky babies and the mothers who can't stand another hour of screaming. No one mentions that both mother and child end up floating blissfully somewhere above their problems. It's not addiction, it's self-care. Then there's cocaine, the new darling of polite society. It's exotic, It's modern. It's endorsed by men with doctorates and mustaches. In one bottle, it's a medicine. In another, it's a miracle. It's what you take when you want to feel productive without appearing indulgent. And Coca-Cola is the perfect disguise. It's cold, sweet, sparkling, and most importantly, legal. You can drink it in daylight without shame, in church clothes without guilt, and in front of your children without question. It's a golden trick of the age. Hide vice behind manners. The drink is practically a metaphor for the century itself. Dark syrup dressed in fizz and charm. People aren't fooled exactly. They just prefer the illusion. Nobody really wants purity. They want permission. And Coca-Cola gives it to them, one elegant glass at a time. You can walk down any main street and see the transformation everywhere. Saloons are out, soda fountains are in. The same urge that once drew people to whiskey now sends them to pharmacies with marble counters and brass fixtures. You take your seat, you smile, you sip. You feel that same gentle surge, the brain waking up, the mood lifting, the pulse skipping just enough to remind you you're alive. But this time, there's no shame, no sermons, just applause for your refinement. The Gilded Age has a genius for making sin sparkle. Even arsenic finds a place in the household, blended into green wallpaper that everyone agrees is soothing. You can decorate your dining room with poison and still host dinner with pride. There's cocaine in the tonic, morphine in the nursery, mercury in the medicine, and lead in the paint. But the floors shine, the glass gleams, and society hums along in perfect, toxic harmony. In this world, Coca-Cola isn't an outlier. It's the crown jewel, the ultimate example of how to take something questionable and make it aspirational. It's not a stimulant, it's sophistication. You're not chasing a high, you're embracing modernity. Every sip feels like progress, every buzz like proof that you belong to a brighter, faster future. You sit at the counter, glass sweating in your hand, watching the reflection of gaslight shimmer in the syrup. The man beside you's wearing a bowler hat, the woman on your other side's wearing lace gloves, and all three of you are on the same quiet wavelength, comfortable, content, slightly vibrating. Nobody talks about drugs anymore. Nobody has to. You've renamed them, repackaged them, and sold them back to yourselves with better branding. The century moves forward, gilded and glowing. Every secret hidden in plain sight. The walls may be laced with arsenic, the drinks with coca, the air with coal dust, but everything looks beautiful from a distance. You raise your glass and take another sip. It tastes like progress. It tastes like the future. And beneath the sweetness, it still hums with the same familiar lie: everything that feels this good can't possibly be bad. You can hear it before you see it. The sound of 30 small chairs scraping against wooden floors, pencils snapping, voices tumbling over one another like a parade that refuses to end. The teacher stands at the front of the room, chalk trembling in her hand, watching as her once orderly classroom turns into something between a carnival and a lightning storm. The culprit isn't rebellion or poor parenting. It's refreshment. Sweet, bubbly, innocent refreshment. The kind you can buy for a nickel at the corner pharmacy. The kind with Coca-Cola painted across the bottle in cheerful red. At first, it seemed harmless, even helpful. Parents bragged that their children were sharper, livelier, more alert. "He's reading 2 grades ahead," one mother boasts. "She's memorized every president," another chimes in. They don't mention the part where their children now wake before dawn, reorganize the pantry alphabetically, and then attempt to debate theology with the family cat. The kids are brilliant, yes, but so is lightning, and nobody wants to live under it. The teachers start comparing notes. Every classroom has a few of them, those bright-eyed prodigies who talk too fast, fidget too much, and raise their hands so often it feels like a moral test. They're not bad kids. They're just accelerated. A new kind of youth, one doctor calls it, with the same tone someone might use for an invasive species. The newspapers run cheerful stories about America's most energetic generation. Nobody calls it a problem yet. They call it promise. You watch as Coca-Cola finds its way into every lunchroom, every school picnic, every reward system. Good behavior earns a treat, the teacher says, holding up a bottle that hisses faintly when opened. The children cheer, their little hands reaching. Nobody wonders if the treat is rewriting their nervous systems. The glass glints under the sunlight, like communion for the modern age. By recess, the playground looks like a battleground of joy. Tiny bodies running at impossible speeds, shrieking with laughter, inventing games so fast even they can't remember the rules. At home, the story's the same. Parents beam with pride as their children rattle off multiplication tables between sips. Doctors nod approvingly. Strong minds, they say. Healthy appetites. Nobody wants to ask what happens when the bottle's empty, but they see it anyway. The crash, the tantrums, the headaches that come like clockwork around dinner time. Mothers call it growing pains. Fathers call it too much sugar. The truth is harder to swallow. Their children are high, and the whole country's clapping for it. Candler's marketing machine is already one step ahead. Coca-Cola starts advertising in school papers and children's magazines. The slogan changes from delicious and refreshing to something softer, sweeter. Drink for health and happiness. It's the perfect trap medicine for the mind wrapped in the language of virtue. Teachers drink it too, because how else do you manage a room full of 8-year-olds vibrating at the frequency of hummingbirds? The cycle feeds itself, kids hyped on Coke, adults exhausted, both chasing the same fizzing clarity that keeps slipping away. By the end of the decade, the schoolhouse isn't just a place for learning. It's a proving ground for America's newest addiction. Report cards glow with praise for alertness and enthusiasm. Parents swap stories about how Coca-Cola has awakened the spirit of their children, as though exhaustion were a sin and stillness a weakness. The nation's children aren't just growing up, they're charging forward, pupils dilated, hearts pounding, minds spinning faster than the century can catch up. And yet, the teachers know. They can feel it in the way the classroom hums, the way the laughter sometimes tips into hysteria. They can see it in the trembling hands that grip pencils too tightly, in the restless eyes that dart to the clock, waiting for the next recess, the next excuse to drink again. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone senses it. Something's off. Something's too bright, too loud, too good. You sit in the back of the room, the air thick with chalk dust and sugar. The teacher wipes her forehead, her hand shaking slightly, and reaches for the bottle she keeps hidden behind the attendance book. One sip, she tells herself, just to take the edge off. The children are still laughing, still glowing, still moving faster than thought. You realize the truth then. This isn't a schoolhouse anymore. It's a laboratory, and the experiment's already working. You can feel the shift before you read about it. The fizz doesn't discriminate. Sweetness tastes the same no matter who's drinking it. Coca-Cola slips quietly across town, past the white marble counters of downtown pharmacies and into neighborhoods where the glassware is simpler, but the laughter sounds the same. For a few nickels, anyone can buy a bottle of modernity, a sip of the same bright energy that fuels the businessmen and their ledgers. It's one of the few things in America that doesn't ask who you are before it refreshes you. For a brief moment, it feels like equality in liquid form. But this is America at the turn of the century, and equality, especially the kind that feels good, isn't something the ruling class can tolerate for long. The newspapers notice first, or rather, they decide to notice. They take the same story that once celebrated white ambition, the drink that builds the nation, and rewrite it into something darker. The headlines change tone, words like invigorating replaced by dangerous, energized, swapped for uncontrollable. The same drug that made a clerk sharper at his desk now, somehow, makes a black man a threat on the street. They call it science, but it's theater. Articles begin appearing with lurid titles like Cocaine-Crazed Negroes, a Menace to the South. Journalists invent whole epidemics to justify fear. One report claims black men under the influence of cocaine are impervious to bullets. Another warns that the colored man, stimulated beyond reason, dares to defy the law. The language drips with hysteria disguised as moral concern. What they're really afraid of isn't violence. It's equality under the influence. For decades, cocaine had been the secret handshake of the educated, the ambitious, the respectable. Doctors prescribed it, professors praised it, even Freud wrote love letters to it. But now that it's being bought and enjoyed in black communities, it suddenly needs regulation. It's not the substance that changes, it's the skin of the hand holding the bottle. Cocaine hasn't crossed the tracks. America's hypocrisy has. You can see how quickly the mood shifts. The same police who once bought tonics at the pharmacy start raiding the same stores for selling to the wrong clientele. Pharmacies in black neighborhoods are accused of spreading vice. Ministers who once called Coca-Cola a temperance drink now denounce it from the pulpit. Their sermons suddenly full of warnings about corruption of the Negro race. The city's moral compass doesn't just wobble, it flips entirely. Meanwhile, Coca-Cola's executives quietly distance themselves. The company's advertising sharpens. The imagery becomes cleaner, whiter, safer. The same drink that used to feature African coca leaves and African cola nuts in its branding now leans hard into white smiles, lace gloves, and Sunday hats. The South's favorite tonic becomes, quite suddenly, the South's most respectable segregationist. Candler doesn't say it out loud, but his marketing knows exactly who it's meant to comfort. The press feeds the frenzy. Sensational stories of crime and cocaine spread faster than fact ever could. They claim it's a Negro drug problem, but the irony is thick enough to choke on. Most of the cocaine still comes from the same white-run pharmacies, sold by the same men who used to call it medicine. Nobody in power sees a contradiction. They just see an opportunity. Fear sells faster than soda. Laws start to follow the headlines. New ordinances restrict who can buy certain narcotic products. Police are told to patrol high-risk districts, a polite phrase that means anywhere not white. Cocaine becomes the justification for everything from raids to lynchings. And Coca-Cola, still quietly reducing its dosage behind the scenes, slips out of the conversation entirely. The company doesn't want to be associated with that kind of cocaine. They'd rather sell happiness to a country that's too busy dividing itself to notice the irony fizzing in its glass. You stand at the counter and watch as the same bottle, same syrup, same bubbles, same buzz means two different things depending on who's holding it. For one man, it's ambition. For another, it's accusation. The newspaper on the counter screams about danger in the streets, while the clerk behind it pours another round for the businessmen who caused the panic in the first place. The truth is bitter beneath the sweetness. Cocaine didn't change anyone. It just revealed what was already there. The drink was equal. The country wasn't. You take a sip, and it tastes the same as it always has. Sharp, sweet, electric. But now, when the bubbles rise, they sound a little more like warning bells. You start to notice it in whispers first, not headlines. The faint murmur of unease sliding through polite society. For 20 years, America's been happily guzzling miracles, syrups, tonics, elixirs that cure everything but curiosity. But now curiosity is back, wearing wire spectacles and carrying a magnifying glass. The country that once celebrated every new chemical as progress has suddenly remembered that progress occasionally kills you. It begins with the magazines. The same ones that once printed Coca-Cola ads now run polite little exposés. "What's really in these tonics?" asks one in elegant cursive, as if the question is purely academic. The writers sound fascinated, not fearful, at first. They visit laboratories, interview pharmacists, sniff bottles like sommeliers of sin. They learn about opium in children's syrups, morphine in cough drops, arsenic in makeup. They write about it with a sense of adventure, like explorers mapping the jungle of American self-medication. Then they stumble across Coca-Cola, and the tone changes. It's not just any tonic, it's the national habit. It's on every lunch counter, in every parlor, at every church social. No one wants to believe that their favorite drink might be anything less than wholesome. But beneath the syrup and sugar, the truth fizzes up. There's cocaine in the glass. Not a metaphor, not a trace actual chemical stimulation, sold to mothers, children, preachers, and presidents. The revelation doesn't cause panic right away. It causes something worse: embarrassment. Nobody likes realizing they've been cheerfully addicted for a decade. You feel it yourself. That low, creeping dread when you read the first articles. The unease that comes from seeing your habits spelled out in print. The word cocaine looks different on the page than it does on the label. It doesn't sound refreshing, it sounds like a confession. But what's one supposed to do? Stop drinking it? You try once, and your hands tremble by afternoon. Your head throbs, your mouth tastes like chalk, and the world feels 2 shades grayer. By sundown, you're back at the fountain, telling yourself it's just for the taste. Meanwhile, the reformers arrive. They're a new breed of Americans, part scientist, part crusader, all outrage. They march into factories demanding transparency. They sniff barrels, inspect ledgers, dip glass rods into syrup and hold them up to the light like judges at a moral science fair. Names like Harvey Wiley begin to circulate, the chief chemist who wants every label in America to tell the truth. He's not after one company, he's after all of them. But Coca-Cola, gleaming and successful, makes too tempting a symbol. It's not just a product, it's a mirror of everything the centuries become. Busy, clever, addicted to feeling better than yesterday. The newspapers begin to fan the flames. Pure food for a pure nation. One headline reads, "What's hiding in your glass?" Another teases. Suddenly, it's fashionable to be outraged. Housewives form leagues. Politicians promise reform. Men who've been drinking cocaine since breakfast vow to rid the country of vice. It's less about purity and more about pride. No one wants to admit they've been fooled by fizz. Inside Coca-Cola's offices, the tension rises. Asa Candler can read the writing on the wall, and it's not written in sugar. He doesn't panic, but he feels the chill of a new age. Regulation is coming. The word pure no longer means clean. It means inspected. He starts making quiet changes, adjusting the formula, trimming the coca leaf content, adding more caffeine to keep the kick alive. The goal isn't reform, it's camouflage. If the world's going to demand purity, then Coca-Cola will sell purity by the barrel, even if it's only skin deep. And you, like everyone else, go along with it. You keep drinking because it's habit, because it's comfort, because pretending feels easier than confronting. The fizz still sings, the sugar still glows, and the papers can print whatever they like. You tell yourself it's not that serious, that America's always loved a little poison with its progress. But deep down, as the reformers shout and the headlines scream, you start to feel something new. A twitch under the skin, a hunger that isn't hunger, a headache that feels like history catching up. For the first time, you wonder if the problem isn't what's in the bottle. Maybe it's what you've become without it. You can almost admire the confidence. Asa Candler stands at the center of the storm, his bow tie straight, his tone steady, his smile unwavering. The papers are shouting, the reformers are marching, the government is sniffing around like a bloodhound with a degree, and Candler doesn't flinch. "No cocaine in Coca-Cola," he declares, and the world exhales in relief. It sounds clean, definitive, honest. It's also, in the most precise sense, technically true for the next batch, the one that hasn't been bottled yet. Candler's genius isn't invention anymore, it's evasion. He's learned that in the new century, truth is elastic, and the public prefers it stretched. The people don't want details, they want reassurance, preferably printed in cursive. And so, While the company quietly tinkers behind closed doors, the advertisements stay cheerful. Smiling faces, radiant women, cherubic children, the usual chorus of innocence. No one needs to know that the magic's been rewritten molecule by molecule. Inside the factory, the transition begins like a secret ritual. The barrels of coca leaves from Peru still arrive, but now they're sent through a process that strips away the cocaine alkaloid. The leaves are spent, chemically sanctified for public consumption. What remains is a whisper of their former strength, a ghost of stimulation so faint it can pass unnoticed. The workers call it decocainization, a word so strange it sounds like progress. The chemists nod, the executives smile, and the paperwork calls it an improvement. It's not a confession, it's camouflage. Coca-Cola doesn't apologize, doesn't admit, doesn't blink. The company simply shifts the narrative from remedy to refreshment, from tonic to taste. One day it's medicine, the next it's lifestyle. The pivot is seamless, the language soft. No one talks about withdrawal anymore. They talk about craving that Coca-Cola flavor. The addiction hasn't disappeared. It's just been rebranded. You can see it happening in the ads. The word health fades out, replaced by happiness. The marble counters of the pharmacy give way to soda fountains and cafes, bright places filled with laughter and respectable thirst. The company's past dissolves under the sparkle of carbonation and a new kind of purity, one that's sold, not proven. Delicious and refreshing becomes both promise and alibi. The newspapers, eager for scandal, keep pushing. They print exposés, wave reports, quote, reformers. But Candler knows how to handle panic. He feeds it sugar until it forgets what it was angry about. The public doesn't want to feel guilty for loving something that feels so good, so they choose not to. People keep drinking, more than ever. The drink that once ran on cocaine now runs on nostalgia, caffeine, and denial, and somehow that combination works even better. The irony is perfect. The more Coca-Cola insists on its innocence, the more its popularity grows. The rebrand is complete, not because the formula changed, but because the story did. The company doesn't just sell a beverage anymore. It sells redemption. Every sip is an act of forgetting of the ingredients, the rumors, the trembling hands, the cracked headlines. You can drink the same syrup you always did, but now it comes wrapped in a narrative of progress, of refinement, of modern virtue. Candler expands production, opens bottling plants, and floods the country with purity by the case. Each bottle gleams like proof of America's ability to cleanse itself without admitting what needed cleansing. The same public that once demanded reform now congratulates itself for drinking something so respectable. They never notice that the line between truth and marketing has been replaced with a slogan. You taste it yourself, the new formula. Smoother, sweeter, less electric. The fizz hits your tongue, and for a moment you think you miss the old bite, that flicker behind your eyes that made the world seem sharper. But then the sugar settles, and you tell yourself it's fine, better, even, healthier. You're part of a nation learning to lie to itself politely. Candler doesn't just survive the scandal, he transcends it. Coca-Cola emerges purified, baptized in syrup and public amnesia. The label reads the same, but the meaning's been rewritten. There's no cocaine in Coca-Cola anymore, just caffeine, sugar, and a century's worth of denial. Sweet, safe, and ready for export. You taste it before you realize what's missing. The drink still fizzes, still chills your tongue, still sparkles in the glass like bottled joy, but something's changed. It's softer now, blunter, like a song missing its high note. You take another sip, waiting for that familiar rush, the pulse behind your eyes, the sudden brightness that used to make the world feel just a little more alive. It doesn't come. The drink is pleasant, but not electric. It's happiness with the edges sanded off. Coca-Cola's chemists know it too. The magic's been diluted. The new formula is technically pure, legally safe, morally sound, and completely unremarkable. Without the cocaine, the drink loses its bite, its shimmer, that strange alchemy that once made people believe in miracles. Candler's faced with a crisis no lawmaker could have predicted. Coca-Cola is now boring. But boredom, in his hands, becomes an opportunity. He doesn't panic. He pivots. If chemistry can't sell excitement anymore, then psychology will. The caffeine stays, now, in heroic quantities, disguised behind sugar and sweetness. The dose doubles, and then doubles again, until the drink hums with a subtler sort of energy, less halo, more heartbeat. The chemists call it balance. The marketers call it invigoration. The public just calls it familiar. The next step is easier. If the drink can't make people high, it can at least make them nostalgic. Coca-Cola's new campaign doesn't promise vitality anymore. It promises memory. The ads fill with smiling faces. Families on picnics, factory workers pausing mid-shift for a moment of refreshment. The message is simple and brilliant. You don't need to feel what you used to. You just need to remember that you once did. And it works. You take a sip and think, that's the taste. The truth is, it isn't, but the mind's a forgiving thing when properly flattered. You start chasing the ghost of the old formula, the way an old song still makes you sway even if the lyrics are gone. Every fizzing glass becomes a time machine, carrying you back to when life felt sharper, faster, and simpler. Coca-Cola doesn't sell euphoria anymore. It sells the memory of it, wrapped in sugar and nostalgia. America, meanwhile, does what it always does with lost pleasure. It industrializes it. Bottling plants multiply. Billboards sprout like mushrooms. Candler floods the streets with slogans that sound less like advertising and more like affirmation. Drink Coca-Cola. Delicious and refreshing. The words are simple, rhythmic, hypnotic. They don't need to sell the drink. They just need to remind you that it belongs in your hand. The caffeine does its job, of course. It's quieter than cocaine, but more patient. It doesn't lift you into the stratosphere, it just keeps you running. The modern American mind doesn't want ecstasy anymore. It wants endurance. The new formula fits perfectly. You can drink it at your desk, between factory shifts, before a sermon. It doesn't make you lose control, it makes you efficient. The country's new drug isn't transcendence, it's productivity. You see the transformation everywhere. The same drink that once symbolized rebellion and indulgence now becomes the lubricant of civilization. Offices stock it, trains serve it, even schools hand it out during events. Coca-Cola isn't a stimulant anymore, it's infrastructure. The drink has been purified into something the nation can depend on without embarrassment. It's no longer a thrill, it's a routine. But there's still something haunting in that routine. You feel it in the way the first sip makes your chest tighten, the way the caffeine buzz hums beneath your skin like a faint, familiar ghost. You tell yourself you've moved on, that this is healthier, safer, better, and maybe it is. But late in the afternoon, when you're on your third glass and chasing that same sparkle you swore you didn't need, you realize the truth. You don't miss the drug. You miss the feeling. The new Coca-Cola gives you just enough to keep believing it's still there. The sweetness, the fizz, the faint illusion that something magical might be happening inside you. You know better, of course, but you drink anyway, because nostalgia is its own kind of high. America's over its cocaine phase, or so it says. But deep down, it's still addicted to the memory of how good it once felt to never question what was in the glass. You watch them stride through the new century like they own it, because they do. The children who once bought 5-cent doses of liquid lightning from marble counters have grown into the adults who run everything that matters. They're the first generation raised on stimulation, a nation of bright-eyed multitaskers who don't blink long enough to question why they can't sit still. They talk faster, move faster, and think they're evolving, when really, They're just caffeinated. The hum in their veins has become the soundtrack of progress. They're the managers now, the inventors, the advertisers, the factory foremen, the ones telling others to keep up. Their childhood high has calcified into habit, but the craving remains. You see it in the way they structure their days, always with something fizzing nearby. A glass on the desk, a bottle in the hand. They don't call it addiction. They call it routine, and they run the country on it. The new America hums with industry and impatience. Typewriters clack, train whistles scream, and everyone's looking for the next innovation to keep the momentum going. The children of cocaine-laced cola are now the adults who mistake exhaustion for virtue. They invent overtime, efficiency reports, and the modern workplace powered by caffeine, sugar, and the ghosts of the coca leaves they once sipped without shame. Every city becomes a blur of movement. Sleep becomes negotiable. In the offices, men bark orders with the rhythm of a telegraph. In the newspapers, headlines promise a better tomorrow, preferably bottled. Advertising itself becomes an art form, a new kind of narcotic for the restless. The Coca-Cola company leads the charge, selling not just a drink, but an identity. Success, cleanliness, optimism, all carbonated into one American idea. You don't just drink Coke anymore. You live it. You become it. You can see the inheritance written across their faces, the manic optimism, the twitching ambition, the inability to slow down long enough to think. They build corporations that stretch across continents, invent machines that outpace horses, wires that carry voices, light that glows without flame. They build the future, but the future looks suspiciously like the same high they've been chasing since childhood, just mechanized. America doesn't dream anymore. It buzzes. Coca-Cola, meanwhile, sits at the center of it all, quietly smiling from every store shelf. It no longer needs cocaine to alter consciousness. It's done that already, permanently, in the national psyche. The taste alone now triggers memory, excitement, productivity. It's the taste of focus, of ambition, of not stopping. You drink it to keep going, and everyone around you does the same. Nobody questions why stopping feels impossible. There's something almost poetic about it. The same children who once lined up at the soda fountain, sticky nickels in hand, now preside over boardrooms and bank vaults, still chasing that same internal fizz. Their energy built skyscrapers, stock markets, and the illusion of endless motion. When they pause to rest, the silence feels unnatural. Stillness feels wrong. The hum has become a part of them, woven into their blood and their economy alike. The irony is that they think they've outgrown it. They laugh about the old days, about how primitive those formulas were, how naive the country once seemed. They sip their new Coke, sweeter, cleaner, modern, and never consider that the addiction didn't disappear. It just matured. The stimulant may have changed, but the need stayed the same. They don't want calm. They want the feeling of doing something, anything, always. You see it in the headlines they print, the ads they run, the way they describe the future: shiny, fast, efficient, relentless. They believe in progress, like their parents believed in God. But beneath the optimism, there's an edge, a constant hum, not of joy, but of dependency. They built an entire civilization around a drink that taught them how to never stop moving, and they call it prosperity. You take another sip yourself, and for a moment, you can almost taste what they're chasing. The illusion that forward motion is the same thing as meaning. It's not cocaine anymore, but the feeling's the same. It's not just in the bottle now. It's in the bloodstream of the century. You wake up one morning in 1904, and cocaine is no longer medicine. It's menace. Yesterday it was a tonic for headaches, a cure for fatigue, a charming chemical companion for polite society. Today it's the devil's dust, a word whispered with disgust in parlors that still smell faintly of it. The same newspapers that once ran ads for Coca wine and Coca elixir now scream about cocaine fiends and dope-crazed criminals. America, as always, has discovered shame right after the high wears off. It happens fast, like all moral pivots. The stories come rolling and each one more dramatic than the last. A headline in Georgia warns that cocaine turns men savage. Another claims it gives superhuman strength to criminals. None of it makes sense, but it doesn't have to. Fear never needs footnotes. The public devours every word, eager to believe that the problem was never them. It was the drug, the poor, the other. The same middle-class families who once kept bottles of Coca-Cola on the dinner table now act as though they've never seen one. Memory gets scrubbed faster than a pharmacist's counter. The racial hysteria is what seals it. Southern papers begin spinning tales of black men driven insane by cocaine, attacking white citizens, defying bullets. It's a grotesque myth, but it does its job. It terrifies. Politicians, who never cared what went into a soda before, suddenly find religion. Police chiefs demand laws. Preachers thunder from pulpits about moral decay and corrupted youth. The same America that just spent 2 decades addicted now demands purity, and Coca-Cola is caught in the middle. Inside the company, there's panic disguised as poise. Asa Candler's team moves fast. Every trace of the old formula, every ad, every record that mentions Coca is quietly retired. New marketing materials are printed, new slogans circulated. The company rewrites its own story, polishing the timeline like a monument. Coca-Cola, they declare, was never about drugs. It was about joy, refreshment, progress. The past isn't erased, it's simply never mentioned again. The syrup stays the same shade of brown, but the meaning shifts entirely. The transformation is stunning. 1 year you can buy cocaine at the pharmacy. The next, you're a criminal for knowing what it looks like. Coca-Cola watches this hysteria unfold and adapts like a creature shedding its skin. The brand becomes cleaner, brighter, more patriotic. The words health and energy disappear from the ads, replaced by delight and comfort. No more talk of medicine, no more talk of Coca, just smiles, families, picnics, and fizz. If you asked the average American in 1905 what Coca-Cola once contained, they'd frown as if you'd insulted the flag. Meanwhile, the laws tighten. The Pure Food and Drug Act looms. Federal inspectors begin poking into bottles, sniffing syrups, demanding labels. The same country that once treated chemistry as a personal experiment now decides it's time for rules. Coca-Cola, having read the room, is already ahead of them. By the time the act passes in 1906, the company's formula is pure in the legal sense, even if the motives behind it are anything but. You see the brilliance of it, though. Coca-Cola doesn't fight the stigma, it uses it. While other patent medicines get dragged into court, Coke reinvents itself as the antidote to vice. It's not an addictive elixir anymore. It's the respectable choice, the drink of office clerks, mothers, churchgoers. It becomes a moral beverage in a suddenly moral nation, and no one dares ask how the world's most famous brand got its start. You can almost hear the silence that follows. No one mentions Pemberton anymore. His morphine habit, his coca syrup, his chemistry experiments, they vanish from the narrative like a bad dream. The early years are rewritten as humble beginnings, not pharmaceutical ones. Coca-Cola didn't come from a druggist's desperation. It came from innovation, inspiration, and divine carbonation. The company prints the myth, and America believes it. The irony is hard to miss. The same generation that once dosed its infants with cocaine-laced syrup now preaches about purity, holding bottles of Coke as if they're proof of moral progress. And maybe they are, in a twisted way. They've learned that the only thing more powerful than a stimulant is denial, and America is very good at both. By the end of the year, Coca-Cola stands spotless, its reputation scrubbed clean by the same public that made it famous. The drug's gone, The memory's gone, and the fizz keeps flowing. You sip from the glass and taste nothing scandalous, nothing illicit, just sugar, caffeine, and the comforting illusion that history can be rewritten, one bottle at a time. You don't notice the shift right away. One day, Coca-Cola is a tonic. The next, it's a feeling. The ads stop talking about headaches, fatigue, or nervous exhaustion. They start talking about you, your family, your friends, your better self, who apparently exists just on the other side of a cold bottle. It's not chemistry anymore. It's emotion. Somewhere between scandal and salvation, Coca-Cola discovers something more powerful than cocaine: storytelling. It starts in the newspapers. The old text-heavy advertisements, dense paragraphs promising vitality and mental vigor vanish. In their place come smiling faces, bright illustrations, and slogans so soft they feel like lullabies. "Drink Coca-Cola," one says. "Delicious and refreshing." It doesn't tell you why you should drink it, because that's no longer the point. It's not about need anymore. It's about want. The product has graduated from the pharmacy to the psyche. Candler knows exactly what he's doing. You can almost see him sitting in his office, realizing that America doesn't crave medicine, it craves identity. So, he sells one. Coca-Cola stops being something you consume and starts being something you belong to. The ads show picnics, dates, summer afternoons, all with the same message. This isn't a drink, it's a moment. The company has taken a stimulant and turned it into a symbol. You don't buy a remedy now. You buy belonging. It's ingenious, really. The timing couldn't be better. The country is changing fast, cities rising, technology humming, people moving too quickly to remember where they came from. Coca-Cola steps in like a gentle reassurance that something stable still exists. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, north or south, urban or rural. When you drink Coke, you're part of the same story. The bottle becomes a passport to Americanness, sweetened and carbonated. You start to see it everywhere. Soda fountains become social spaces, temples of small talk and shared bubbles. The act of drinking Coke feels communal, moral even. The word refreshment replaces medicine in the cultural vocabulary, as if the two were ever that different. But this new kind of refreshment isn't about healing the body. It's about curing anxiety, the kind that comes from living in a world that never stops changing. Every sip says, "You're fine." Every ad says, "You belong." The brand becomes a mirror, reflecting not what America is, but what it wants to believe about itself. Wholesome, cheerful, innocent. The same country that just banned its own favorite stimulant now holds up Coca-Cola as proof that it's moved on. The irony bubbles beneath the surface, but no one mentions it. The drink that once fueled sleeplessness now sells relaxation. The beverage that once buzzed with alkaloids now promises calm. And you buy it, not just the bottle, but the illusion. The marketing gets sharper, more cinematic. You see women in summer dresses laughing under trees, young men lifting glass bottles to the camera, everyone looking as though they've never known a bad day. The message is unmistakable. Life's better with Coca-Cola. Not different, not altered better. The company doesn't have to say a word about purity or chemistry. The feeling does the talking. This is the moment Coca-Cola stops being a drink and becomes an idea. The idea that happiness can be bought, bottled, and shared. That even if the world's uncertain, refreshment is guaranteed. That you can pour a liquid into a glass and, for a few seconds, everything feels okay. It's not science anymore, it's psychology. The stimulant's gone from the formula, but not from the marketing. The buzz has just moved from your bloodstream to your imagination. And it works. It works better than cocaine ever did. Because you don't build tolerance to nostalgia. You don't crash from belonging. You don't have to admit you're addicted to comfort. The more Coca-Cola sells that feeling, the more the country rearranges itself around it. Families, holidays, even the idea of leisure. America's first great brand isn't about flavor or formula. It's about faith. Faith that happiness comes in red and white, sealed with a hiss of carbonation and the promise of normalcy. You look at the bottle again. The same shape, the same fizz, the same sweetness. But what you're really tasting now isn't a drink, it's denial done beautifully. You see it first on a store sign, then on a crate, then on a wall that seems to glow even when the sun fades. The red catches your eye before the word does. It's bright, commanding, warm, in a way that feels familiar before you realize why. It's the same color as excitement, appetite, heartbeat, and right in the center, written in white curls of script so soft they almost look holy, sits the name, Coca-Cola. You don't know it yet, but that swirl of red and white is about to colonize your subconscious. It starts as branding, but quickly becomes something closer to theology. The red means life, motion, confidence. The white means purity, innocence, safety. Together, they create the illusion that you're indulging and absolved at the same time. Drink it, and you're energized, but not sinful. Refreshed, but not reckless. The color palette becomes a psychological trick, a national mood, a quiet confession hiding in plain sight. The logo spreads faster than any sermon. By the time you blink, it's everywhere on awnings, ice chests, baseball scoreboards, and the backs of calendars. You could close your eyes in any American town and still see it burned onto your retinas. Even if you don't drink Coke, you believe in it. That's the brilliance of the red label. It doesn't ask you to buy, it just reminds you that you will, and you do. The bottle sits on every counter, and every glance at it feels like a small reward. You start associating it with good days, with friends, with being seen. The first sip tastes less like sweetness now and more like habit, the way home smells after you've been gone too long. You're not addicted to the drink anymore, you're addicted to the feeling of recognizing it. The caffeine hums quietly in your blood, but the real high is emotional. The genius is in how simple it looks. A red background, a white script, a curved shape that feels almost human. It's the most innocent-looking brand in history, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Because you don't see the manipulation, you feel it. Every time you spot that label, your brain flickers with a tiny jolt of warmth, comfort, belonging. The same neural pathway cocaine once lit up now fires for color and memory. The drug's gone, but the wiring's still there. The company leans into it hard. They don't sell the taste anymore. They sell the association. Coca-Cola becomes shorthand for American life itself. Baseball games, road trips, summer afternoons, a world where everyone's smiling and nothing hurts for long. Even the act of opening a bottle becomes ritual. The pop of the cap, the hiss of carbonation, the first chill against your lip. Every sense gets recruited into the memory machine. It's not just advertising anymore. It's conditioning. You've been trained to associate happiness with red, relief with white, and belonging with the curve of that logo. You don't think about it. You just respond. It's Pavlov's bell in liquid form, and you're the well-behaved dog. You notice it most when you try something else. A different soda feels wrong, too bitter, too unfamiliar, like cheating. You tell yourself, Coca-Cola simply tastes better, but the truth is more subtle. It tastes like trust, like the promise that nothing will ever really change as long as the bottle looks the same. Even after the formula's altered, the ingredients tweaked, the flavor sweetened beyond recognition, you don't care. The red and white are enough. Every revolution needs a flag, and Coca-Cola's found one that flies over both, the body and the mind. It doesn't scream, it smiles. It doesn't seduce, it reassures. It tells you that the rush you once got from the drink still lives somewhere inside you, buried under nostalgia and caffeine. You're not addicted anymore, but you'll never be entirely free. Because what Coca-Cola sold you in those first wild years wasn't just stimulation, it was connection. And now, every time you see that red label, your brain whispers the same lie it's been telling for decades. You're safe here. You're home. Take another sip. You picture him in a dim Georgia room, hunched over a cluttered desk, the air thick with the smell of chemicals and desperation. The man who gave America its favorite drink doesn't look like a visionary. He looks tired. His clothes hang loose. His hands tremble. His eyes are half shadowed by pain and morphine haze. John Stith Pemberton, the pharmacist, the wounded veteran, the accidental alchemist, has no idea that he's created the closest thing America will ever have to holy water. He just wants the pain to stop. The war took his health. The morphine took his peace. And his invention, his one glimmer of brilliance, will be taken too. You can almost hear him laugh at the irony. The drink that will define a nation starts as self-medication, a concoction born from boredom and agony. He doesn't dream of global empires or factory lines. He dreams of comfort, relief in a glass. That's all. He mixes coca leaves and cola nuts, sugar and syrup, in the same spirit as a man patching his own wounds. Every spoonful of powder, every hiss of the burner, feels like control. The irony is that he's curing pain with the very thing that deepens it. His morphine dependency keeps him company through the long nights, the same way Coca-Cola will later keep a nation awake through its own restless ones. He's not an inventor in a lab coat. He's a man trying not to fall apart. When he first sells the formula, it's a modest success, barely enough to buy groceries, let alone redemption. He tinkers with it, improves it, offers it to anyone who'll listen. But businessmen smell opportunity faster than chemists smell trouble. The rights slip from his hands, bit by bit, traded for cash he needs to fund the one addiction he can't patent. Asa Candler, sharp and relentless, takes the recipe and the dream. He does what visionaries do. He markets it, multiplies it, moralizes it. Pemberton fades into the background of his own creation, his name left off the bottle that will one day define modern branding. You imagine him hearing about it in passing, how the drink has caught on in Atlanta, how people are lining up for it at fountains. Maybe he smiles, maybe he doesn't. By then, his world has narrowed to bottles of medicine and unpaid bills. He dies in 1888, sick, broke, and unnoticed, long before his syrup becomes legend. When he's buried, there's no mention of Coca-Cola on his grave, no sign that he brewed the blueprint for corporate immortality. But you like to think he sees it now, wherever he is. The red signs, the glass bottles, the crowds clinking their ice-filled glasses in unison. 1 billion people taking the same sip he once mixed with shaking hands. Maybe he's proud. Maybe he's bitter. Maybe he watches the ads, the ones with smiling families, glowing slogans, and gospel choirs of capitalism, and mutters, "I told you it worked." Because it did work, just not for him. His formula outlived him, multiplied, industrialized, and sanctified. It transcended medicine, morality, and memory. It became culture, habit, economy. The drink that once eased one man's pain now fuels entire nations' ambitions. It's almost poetic. The man who couldn't escape his own dependency invents a new one for everyone else. And yet, buried beneath the branding and nostalgia, his fingerprints remain. The pharmacist's precision, the addict's yearning, the wounded man's need to feel better, even for a moment. Coca-Cola carries all of that, hidden in its sweetness. Every bottle is a quiet echo of his search for relief, repeated billions of times by people who don't even know his name. You raise a glass and imagine him in the afterlife, shaking his head at the spectacle. Maybe he's laughing at the irony, or maybe he's simply amazed that something born from his pain became the most recognizable symbol of pleasure on earth. The crowd toasts progress. The chemist toasts proof. And somewhere, over the hiss of carbonation, you can almost hear him whisper, half proud, half haunted. I told you it worked. You don't see the switch happen. Nobody does. One day the drink hums like it used to, and the next it's just a little softer, a little less electric. But no one says why. Behind the curtain, a quiet chemical miracle unfolds, one that keeps the taste alive while killing the scandal. Asa Candler's chemists, pale and precise men in long coats, invent a phrase that sounds almost holy in its sterility: decocainized coca leaf extract. It's genius in its simplicity. The flavor stays, the thrill goes, and the conscience of America remains untarnished. The coca leaf itself is too famous to abandon. It gives the drink its name, its mystique, its faint whisper of danger. But after the newspapers and reformers turn cocaine into the devil's dust, Candler knows he can't risk association. So he finds a loophole. If the public hates cocaine, fine. He'll sell them everything but cocaine. The company begins importing tons of Peruvian coca leaves, not for narcotics, but for nostalgia. The leaves are treated, washed, purified, stripped of their active alkaloid, and left with nothing but the ghost of a stimulant. Somewhere in New Jersey, a small chemical plant becomes the gatekeeper of that ghost. It's called the Stepan Company, an unassuming facility with a contract so secret it sounds like urban legend. Every year, shipments of coca leaves arrive under heavy regulation, escorted like precious cargo. The plant extracts the cocaine which still exists in the raw material and hands it over to the government for medical use. What remains is a neutralized essence, legally harmless but symbolically potent. That purified residue, the spent leaf, goes straight into Coca-Cola syrup. No one talks about it. No one ever has to. The system runs so smoothly, so quietly, that generations grow up believing the company long abandoned its past. In reality, the relationship never ends. It just evolves into bureaucracy. The same plant that once produced narcotics now manufactures nostalgia. The pipeline from Peru to Atlanta stays open, hidden in plain sight under the language of flavoring agents. And you keep drinking, unaware that every sip carries the faintest trace of the past, a molecular memory of a time when euphoria was measured in milligrams. You think about how perfect it is, how American it is, to take something scandalous, sanitize it, and keep selling it as innocence. The drink that once made headlines for its chemical kick now makes billions on its purity. The irony is that the formula never really changed. The process did. The illusion did. Coca-Cola doesn't deny its history, it just dilutes it. A spoonful of sugar, a dash of chemistry, and a century's worth of plausible deniability. Inside the company, they call it continuity. Outside, it's called genius. People still taste the same richness, the same mysterious depth, without realizing what's missing. The coca leaf becomes both relic and ingredient, a symbol so thoroughly tamed that it's invisible. You can print it on the label now, and no one blinks. Coca no longer means danger. It means heritage. The branding has done what chemistry started. It's transformed a narcotic into nostalgia. Meanwhile, the Stepan Company keeps working. The shipments still come, quietly, discreetly, as if nothing strange about a beverage company maintaining the only legal cocaine processing arrangement in the United States. There's a certain poetry to it, a trade route of temptation turned respectable, a secret handshake between commerce and chemistry. Somewhere, a worker stirs a vat of leaves that once carried revolution and addiction, and now just contribute. Flavoring extract number 5. You take a sip, and the taste feels familiar, almost timeless. You can't describe it exactly: earthy, sweet, a hint of something foreign that lingers just long enough to remind you it's there. You don't know that you're tasting the remnants of a century-old compromise, the residue of a scandal alchemized into normalcy. The drink still carries the DNA of its outlaw origins, cleaned and polished for polite company. You swallow and smile. The fizz tickles your throat, and somewhere beneath the sugar and caffeine, a whisper remains not chemical, but historical. Coca-Cola may have lost its high, but it never lost its secret. And in a way, you're still drinking the same thing people were in 1886, just filtered through time, law, and a century of denial. It starts with a poster. A woman in a bright red dress smiles out from the page, her hand wrapped around a frosty glass bottle. There's nothing written about ingredients, nothing about health, no trace of the pharmacy where it all began. Just that smile, the color red, and the suggestion that happiness can be bought for 5 cents. It works better than chemistry ever did. Advertising doesn't just sell Coca-Cola now, it becomes Coca-Cola. You see it everywhere, on the side of trains, painted across barns, glowing from electric signs in cities that never used to stay awake this late. Each one says the same thing without ever saying it outright. You're not drinking a beverage. You're participating in America. The bottle isn't medicine anymore. It's myth. The fizz isn't caffeine. It's culture. And every time you take a sip, you're not quenching thirst. You're pledging allegiance. The slogans evolve like gospel verses. Delicious and refreshing. Drink Coca-Cola. It's the real thing. They're not commands, they're affirmations. You're not being sold something. You're being reminded of what you already believe. That Coke belongs everywhere. In your hand, in your fridge, in your childhood memories, in your sense of who you are. You could stop drinking it if you wanted to. You just don't want to. By the 1,920 seconds, advertising isn't just a part of business. It is business. Coca-Cola leads the charge. They perfect the soft sell, the emotional hook, the art of making you feel something before you realize why. It's not about taste, it's about belonging. The ads don't show thirst, they show friendship, laughter, romance, patriotism. Coke isn't positioned as a luxury or a necessity, it's in this inevitability. The bottle itself becomes an icon, sculpted to be recognizable even in the dark. That familiar curve, narrow neck, round base, waist, like a silhouette, turns an ordinary container into something sensual, almost human. You can spot it by touch, by sound, by memory. When it clinks against ice, it doesn't just make a noise, it makes a promise. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, Coke will taste exactly the same. The company calls it consistency. You call it comfort. Soon the ads stop needing words. A single image, a bottle on a picnic blanket, condensation glistening, sunlight dancing through the glass is enough. The message seeps in between your thoughts, so quiet you don't notice. Coca-Cola doesn't ask for your attention. It earns your affection. And by the time you realize how deep it runs, it's already part of your emotional landscape. You don't drink Coke to wake up anymore. You drink it to remember who you think you are. The timing couldn't be better. The country's speeding into modernity, cars, radios, telephones, 1,000 new distractions. Everything's louder, faster, noisier. But Coca-Cola stays simple. It doesn't change to chase the times. It makes the times chase it. The red label becomes a constant in a world that keeps reinventing itself. When everything else feels uncertain, you know the taste will never betray you. It's the flavor of stability, the illusion of timelessness. And yet, underneath all that gloss, there's something almost haunting. The more the ads tell you Coke is happiness, the more you start to believe happiness should feel like Coke. That quick burst of sweetness, that little fizz at the back of your throat. It's not satisfaction, it's suggestion. You're chasing a sensation that lasts a few seconds but lingers in your mind like a song you can't stop humming. You don't drink Coca-Cola because you need it anymore. You drink it because it's everywhere, and everywhere feels empty without it. The bottle isn't a beverage, it's a totem. It tells you that you belong to something vast, familiar, and safe. The fizz becomes more than sound. It becomes a signal that you're still part of the story, still one of the faithful. Somewhere, Pemberton's ghost might be laughing, The morphine-soaked chemist who only wanted to soothe his nerves ends up inventing the purest form of psychological addiction ever sold. You raise the bottle, take a sip, and it tastes like memory, like comfort, like the idea that you were never really drinking at all. You were just being reminded who you were supposed to be. You tell yourself it's over. The scandal, the chemistry, the days of invisible highs hiding in soda fountains. Coca-Cola has gone clean. The nation has learned its lesson, and everyone is moving on. But deep down, nothing's really changed. The cocaine may be gone, but the craving it woke up in America, the need to feel awake, sharp, unstoppable, has only found new disguises. The country that once drank its narcotics with ice now takes them black, roasted, and steaming. The first replacement is obvious. Coffee steps into the spotlight, smug and steady, pretending it's the responsible cousin in the stimulant family. There's nothing illegal about it, nothing scandalous. It's respectable energy, dressed in porcelain cups and office etiquette. You drink it before work, not after. You pour it for guests, not strangers. And yet, it's the same story, a ritual of need disguised as routine. The same rush, the same crash, the same hollow reassurance that everything's fine as long as your hands are shaking in the right direction. Sugar becomes the second accomplice. It's sweet, innocent, patriotic. It hides in everything: cakes, cereals, and, yes, still in your glass. You're told it's energy, vitality, a reward for effort. In reality, it's a chemical handshake between your brain and your bloodstream, one that whispers, just one more sip. Every generation inherits the craving and pretends it's culture. The birthday cake, the Sunday dessert, the after-school treat, all gentle little rituals designed to keep the system humming. You don't question it because it tastes like home. Then there's nicotine, the third act in America's love story with stimulation. Cigarettes light up the world like tiny, burning promises. The same advertisers who once sold syrup now sell smoke, and the slogans sound eerily familiar. Refreshment, satisfaction, a pause that soothes. Every puff, every sip, every bite feeds the same hunger. The desire to feel something more than ordinary, something sharper than calm. You're not escaping anything, really. You're just keeping pace. Coca-Cola watches this unfold with quiet amusement. It doesn't have to compete. It's already part of the Trinity. A bottle of Coke on a lunch counter next to a pack of Camels and a cup of coffee is the new American altar. 3 stimulants, 1 identity: productivity, optimism, endurance. The culture has changed costumes, but not behavior. You've swapped 1 chemical for 3, traded a single addiction for a lifestyle. You can feel it in the rhythm of the country itself. Everything moves faster, talks faster, builds faster. The factory belts never stop. The newspapers print around the clock, and people boast about exhaustion as if it's proof of character. Wide awake becomes a virtue. Tired becomes a confession. The nation doesn't sleep. It hums. The very thing Coca-Cola promised, a society always refreshed, always alert, has become reality. Not because of what's in the bottle anymore, but because the bottle taught everyone how to live. The irony is that you don't even notice it happening. You think you're making choices: what to drink, what to smoke, what to sweeten. But they're all variations of the same impulse. You reach for something, anything, that keeps you from feeling the drag of stillness. Coca-Cola isn't the cause anymore. It's the blueprint. Every ad, every slogan, every caffeine-laced product owes its existence to that first promise of liquid energy sold as purity. And through it all, Coca-Cola keeps smiling. It doesn't need the drug anymore. The brand is the drug. The fizz, the color, the clink of ice against glass, they're enough to trigger the same chemical flicker in your brain that once came from coca leaves. The formula is clean, but the craving it taught you is permanent. You've built an entire culture around staying awake, and now sleep feels like surrender. You finish your drink, coffee, soda, whatever, and reach for another without thinking. That's the real inheritance, the quiet continuity of a nation that measures its worth by its pulse. The cocaine-free America looks proud of itself in the mirror, but its eyes are wide and restless. You can take the drug out of the drink. You just can't take the addiction out of the American dream. You watch them unroll the parchment like it's a classified relic from another civilization. In a way, it is. The scientists stand over the formula for the original Coca-Cola with the reverence of archaeologists dusting off a mummy. Except this mummy is carbonated and smells faintly of caramel and hubris. They run their instruments, their scans, their algorithms, and when the numbers settle, the collective conclusion is simple. What these people were drinking in the 1,890 seconds was not a beverage. It was an event. The lab notes read like a chemical romance novel. Coca leaves steeped in syrup, cola nuts ground fine, sugar levels that could resurrect the dead. Add in the caffeine, a dash of vanilla, some citric acid for bite, and, yes, just a touch of pharmaceutical-grade cocaine. You think back to the polite pharmacy counters where this concoction first fizzed into glasses, sold by men in bow ties and optimism, and you realize the dosage wasn't medicinal. It was aggressive. A single glass of early Coca-Cola contained enough stimulant to make a monk tap dance. When researchers reconstruct the math, it gets even more absurd. The average adult in 1890 might have consumed 2 or 3 glasses a day. Children, maybe 1 or 2 more, because nobody was counting. Each serving carried trace levels that, by modern standards, would have sent a Red Bull executive to the ER. It wasn't addiction disguised as wellness. It was wellness redefined as addiction. The fact that people thought they were feeling better wasn't a metaphor. They were chemically experiencing the sensation of having all their problems dissolved into carbonated euphoria. Historians laugh nervously as they compare the stimulant intake of a 19th century soda drinker to that of a modern-day professional athlete on performance enhancers. The difference? Branding. Back then, you called it a tonic. Today, you'd call it a lawsuit. But the data doesn't lie. Those early customers weren't refreshed. They were turbocharged. They were living inside a national experiment in chemically assisted optimism. The only reason no one noticed was because everyone was doing it. One scientist points out the irony that entire generations of children were dosed with this brew daily, their small hearts beating in sync with the Industrial Revolution. These were the kids who would grow up to invent assembly lines, skyscrapers, and typewriters that could withstand 40 words a minute and a tremor. You start to suspect the hyperactivity of a nation might have been less about ambition and more about biochemistry. A country built on caffeine, sugar, and trace cocaine wasn't just metaphorically buzzing, it was literally vibrating. They analyze hair samples from preserved remains, measure residual compounds, and the findings read like a confession. The stimulant intake was enough to affect sleep cycles, mood regulation, and probably the way people saw God. But somehow, it all worked. America didn't burn out. It industrialized. The same chemical cocktail that would have been banned under any modern regulation helped launch a century of progress. You begin to see the pattern. Every leap forward in American history comes with a jitter behind it. In the lab, one of the researchers looks up from her notes and mutters, "No wonder the 20th century happened so fast." She's not joking. The rate of innovation, the restless churn of invention and consumption, it all feels less like coincidence and more like consequence. The drink didn't just keep people awake. It kept a civilization running at double speed. When your bloodstream is half glucose and half motivation, you don't stop to question the pace. You just keep building. You picture the scene. School children chugging bottled lightning before arithmetic. Businessmen sipping liquid confidence before deals. Housewives scrubbing the same floor twice because their thoughts are racing faster than their hands. This wasn't casual consumption. It was lifestyle chemistry on a national scale. And now, 100 years later, the scientists can see it in the data and the heartbeat of an empire recorded in milligrams. They close the old recipe book and seal it behind glass, but the evidence doesn't need preserving. You can feel it every time you open a can, every time you hear that hiss of carbonation and the fizz whispers, "Go faster." The formula changed, but the frequency remains. America still hums at the same pitch, just without the powder. There's a moment in every empire when the apology should come. The moment when someone looks back at the wreckage and says, "We might have gone a bit too far." But Coca-Cola never has that moment. It doesn't need one. The world's too busy drinking to ask questions, and the company's too good at rewriting its own story. What began as a morphine addict's kitchen experiment now glows on billboards from Tokyo to Topeka as the taste of happiness. You'd almost admire the audacity if it weren't so perfectly rehearsed. The quiet apology hides in the rebrand. The cocaine fades out of the formula. The script flips from cure to comfort, and the language of science gives way to the language of feeling. Nobody ever says, "Sorry we dosed your grandparents," because the new message drowns it out completely. Enjoy. It's the perfect pivot. Replace confession with nostalgia. Every Christmas commercial, every retro ad, every collectible tin sign becomes a smokescreen. The past doesn't disappear, it just gets airbrushed in red and white. You can feel the silence in the way Coca-Cola talks about its history. The official museum in Atlanta calls it an era of experimentation. That's one way to describe a 19th century drug ring with better fonts. The placards don't mention dosage or dependence. They talk about innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. They frame Pemberton as a visionary, not a veteran with a morphine problem. Asa Candler isn't a hustler who quietly diluted cocaine levels before Congress came knocking. He's a marketing pioneer, the man who brought refreshment to the world. It's a masterclass in selective memory. The funny part is how easy it is to believe it. You walk through the gift shop, the scent of syrup and nostalgia in the air, and it's hard to imagine this bubbly icon ever being dangerous. You buy a souvenir bottle, pose for a picture, and the story settles comfortably in your brain. This was never about drugs, only joy. History bends to carbonation. It fizzes, it sparkles, it washes away the aftertaste. You're not supposed to remember the pharmacology, you're supposed to remember the feeling. Every generation since has helped the company bury the evidence by accident. Your grandparents had Coke at the drive-in. Your parents drank it at picnics. You drank it at lunch, watching the condensation slide down the glass like it's part of some holy ritual. That's how effective the silence is. It doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like legacy. The missing apology becomes irrelevant because the story that replaced it is sweeter. And if you listen closely, there's a strange kind of poetry in the way people defend it. It was a different time, they say. They didn't know. But they did. Newspapers wrote about the dangers, scientists warned of overuse, and still, the syrup poured. What Coca-Cola understood better than anyone was that people would forgive anything if it came with enough sugar and a slogan. The company didn't have to erase its past. It just had to make you nostalgic for it. You can almost picture the executives sitting around a table in the early 1900s, deciding not to speak of it again. They don't deny what happened. Not exactly, they just stop mentioning it. History moves on, and the silence hardens into myth. The brand survives every moral panic, every decade, every scandal, by doing what it's always done, staying fizzy, staying friendly, and never, ever saying sorry. And maybe that's the genius of it. The world doesn't want contrition, it wants continuity. People don't crave truth, they crave tradition. Coca-Cola offers both in the same bottle, a liquid time capsule that lets you taste innocence, even if you know it was engineered. The apology never happens because no one asks for it. The product has already done the work. It gives you comfort, and comfort forgives everything. So the story settles quietly in history's blind spot. The chemist fades, the cocaine disappears, and all that remains is the myth of the drink that made the world smile. You take a sip, the bubbles rise, and you can almost hear the unspoken words hiding under the fizz. Not, "We're sorry," just, "You're welcome." It's the middle of the 20th century, and Coca-Cola has and stopped being a drink. It's a declaration. You see it on war posters, on neon signs, in the hands of movie stars. It's poured beside apple pie, clutched by astronauts, and toasted on Christmas morning. The bottle has become shorthand for the entire country, sweet, loud, and a little bit unstoppable. Somewhere along the way, the fizz replaced the flag. You don't buy Coke because you're thirsty. You buy it because it tells you who you are. The cocaine years have been edited out of the script. Those days exist only as a footnote, a curious rumor whispered by historians and chemistry nerds. For the rest of the world, Coke has always been innocent, a sugary ambassador of optimism. The formula is a secret now, but not the kind that scares anyone anymore. It's the comforting kind, like Grandma's cookie recipe or the nuclear launch codes. Nobody really wants to know what's inside. They just want it to keep tasting like childhood. You drink it at the movies, the beach, the drive-in, the funeral. It fits anywhere because it means everything. Coke is refreshment, nostalgia, rebellion, conformity, all poured into 12 ounces of bubbles. It's the drink of soldiers and sweethearts, mechanics and presidents. The same syrup that once sold itself as medicine now sells itself as memory, and no one finds that strange. Somewhere in the shift from pharmacies to billboards, Coca-Cola discovered the real drug wasn't cocaine, it was comfort. The ads know this better than you do. Smiling families, glistening glasses, a horizon full of sunlight and good intentions. Every frame tells you that life is better when it's carbonated. Even the color scheme feels moral: red for passion, white for purity. A palette that makes capitalism look holy. By the time the Cold War hits, Coke is more than a beverage. It's a geopolitical stance. American soldiers hand out bottles overseas like missionaries with better branding. Freedom, it turns out, comes with a straw. In the 1,950 seconds, suburban refrigerators become shrines. Bottles line the shelves beside casseroles and optimism. The clink of glass becomes a soundtrack to barbecues and baby showers. And nobody ever says the word addiction. The craving has gone respectable. It doesn't matter that the sugar hits harder than morphine in the bloodstream, or that caffeine keeps the nation buzzing. What matters is that it feels wholesome, democratic, and endlessly repeatable. Coca-Cola isn't selling happiness anymore. It's selling the performance of it. When the space age arrives, Coke rides the rocket. Astronauts float in orbit, holding cans emblazoned with the same cursive script that once sat on dusty drugstore counters. The message is clear. This isn't just an American success story. It is America. The drink that started as a nerve tonic for wounded veterans now fuels the most ambitious species in history. It's poetry written in carbonation. You can't tell where the brand ends and the culture begins. By now, no one questions how it got here. The story of cocaine has dissolved completely, replaced by a mythology of purity and perseverance. Coca-Cola's history has been flattened into a symbol, smoothed over like a coin that's been passed through too many hands. You could tell people that it began with a wounded chemist and a bottle of morphine, and they'd laugh, because the truth sounds less believable than the myth. They'd rather keep the version where Coke represents joy, unity, and eternal refreshment, the one that fits on a billboard and doesn't ruin the taste. You take a sip from your can, and the sound it makes, the hiss, the fizz, the tiny eruption of bubbles, is as familiar as your own heartbeat. It's not chemistry you're drinking anymore. It's history, sweetened, carbonated, and carefully repackaged for eternal consumption. Every drop is a lie you've chosen to love. You don't think about the leaves from Peru or the addicts who built the empire. You just taste the promise that everything is fine. that happiness can be bottled, and that America will never stop smiling as long as the syrup keeps flowing. The can hisses open with that perfect metallic sigh, the sound of modern contentment. You lift it without thinking, fingers curling around the cold aluminum like they've done it 1,000 times before. The fizz climbs the sides, eager and alive, and when it touches your lips, it tastes like every commercial you've ever seen. Sunlight, laughter, and normalcy. You tell yourself it's harmless. Just sugar, caffeine, bubbles. You've earned it. But deep down, you know this ritual isn't about thirst anymore. It's about memory. The first sip hits with that signature sting, sharp enough to make you blink, sweet enough to make you forgive it. You feel the caffeine rise in your chest, the sugar surge in your blood, and for a brief moment, the world snaps into focus. Everything feels just a little more possible, just a little more alive. It's subtle, civilized, perfectly engineered. You're not wired, you're refreshed. The marketing told you so, and you've repeated it enough times to believe it. You look down at the red can in your hand, the same logo your grandparents saw on glass bottles a century ago. It's barely changed, a miracle of branding, or maybe hypnosis. That looping white script doesn't just say Coca-Cola. It says, trust me. It says, this is who we are. Every fizzing bubble feels like a handshake with history, a gentle reminder that addiction can look wholesome if it smiles wide enough. The funny part is, you don't even need to like it anymore. You crave the ritual, not the flavor. The cold sip on a hot day, the crack of the tab during a movie, the way the bubbles sting your nose like tiny sparks of recognition. It's not refreshment, it's reassurance. You're reenacting a century-old habit dressed up as comfort, the modern version of a Victorian pharmacist handing you a tonic for your nerves. The only difference is, now it comes in a 12-pack. You imagine John Pemberton somewhere beyond the clouds, watching all this unfold with a grin. The wounded Confederate chemist, long gone, whose morphine-addled experiment became the bloodstream of capitalism. He probably never dreamed his nerve syrup would outlive him by 100 years, outlast empires, and be worshipped in vending machines from Seoul to Sao Paulo. If ghosts could collect royalties, he'd be the richest spirit in heaven. As you drink, the irony lingers in the aftertaste. Coca-Cola was supposed to heal the mind, not define it, but it did both. It took the national ache for stimulation, bottled it, and taught everyone to sip their way through anxiety, exhaustion, and boredom. It turned craving into culture, and culture into habit. You can't fault it for being effective. It's been refining the same promise since the 1800s. That life feels better with a little fizz, and the only thing worse than wanting more is running out. You glance at the can again, condensation dripping like quiet confession. The label no longer lists coca leaves or syrup claims or miracle cures. Just ingredients you can barely pronounce, and a guarantee that it still tastes exactly like you remember. That's the genius of it, the illusion of permanence. Every time you open a Coke, you're not drinking a soda. You're participating in a legacy of engineered desire. You're sipping the American dream, carbonated and conveniently portable. The last few bubbles pop softly in your mouth, fading too quickly to catch. You know what's coming next, that faint emptiness, the half-second lull before the thought forms. Maybe just one more. That's the legacy nobody talks about. Not the cocaine, not the chemists, not the marketing campaigns. It's that quiet hum of want, carefully built molecule by molecule until it feels like instinct. You think you're making a choice. Really, you're fulfilling a century-old craving written into your taste buds before you were born. You tilt the can, hear the hollow echo, and smile anyway. It's fine. It's harmless. It's just a drink. The same lie the country's been telling itself since 1886. You take another sip, even though it's empty, just to chase the memory of the fizz.